Chapter 1. This is the story of John Segrave, of his life, which was unsatisfactory, of his love, which was unsatisfied, of his dreams, and of his death. And if in the two latter he found what was denied in the two former, then his life may, after all, be taken as a success. Who knows, John Segrave came of a family which had been slowly going downhill for the last century. They had been landowners since the days of Elizabeth, but their last piece of property was sold. It was thought well that one of the sons at least should acquire the useful art of money-making. It was an unconscious irony of fate that John should be the one chosen. With his strangely sensitive mouth and the long dark blue slits of eyes that suggested an elf or a faun, something wild and of the woods. It was incongruous that he should be offered up, a sacrifice on the altar of finance, the smell of the earth, the taste of the sea salt on one's lips, and the free sky above one's head. These were the things beloved by John Segrave, to which he was to bid farewell. At the age of 18, he became a junior clerk in a big business house. 7 years later, he was still a clerk, not quite so junior, but with status otherwise unchanged. The faculty for getting on in the world had been omitted from his makeup. He was punctual, industrious, plodding a clerk and nothing but a clerk, and yet he might have been what he could hardly answer that question himself. But he could not rid himself of the conviction that somewhere there was a life in which he could have counted. There was power in him, swiftness of vision, a something of which his fellow toilers had never had a glimpse. They liked him. He was popular because of his air of careless friendship, and they never appreciated the fact that he barred them but by that same manner from any real intimacy. The dream came to him suddenly. It was no childish fantasy growing and developing through the years. It came on a midsummer night, or rather early morning, and he woke from it tingling all over, striving to hold it to him as it fled, slipping from his clutch in the elusive way dreams have. Desperately he clung to it. It must not go. It must not. He must remember the house. It was the house. Of course. The house he knew so well. Was it a real house? Or did he merely know it in dreams? He didn't remember. But he certainly knew it very well. The faint gray light of the early morning was stealing into the room. The stillness was extraordinary. At 4:30 a.m., London, weary London, found her brief instant of peace. John Segrave lay quiet, wrapped in the joy, the exquisite wonder and beauty of his dream. How clever it had been of him to remember it. A dream flitted so quickly, as a rule, ran past you, just as with waking consciousness, your clumsy fingers sought to stop and hold it, but he had been too quick for this dream. He had seized it as it was slipping swiftly by him. It was really a most remarkable dream. There was the house, and his thoughts were brought up with a jerk, for when he came to think of it, he couldn't remember anything but the house. And suddenly, with a tinge of disappointment, he recognized that, after all, the house was quite strange to him. He hadn't even dreamed of it before. It was a white house, standing on high ground. There were trees near it, blue hills in the distance, but its peculiar charm was independent of surroundings and this was the point, the climax of the dream. It was a strangely beautiful house. His pulses quickened as he remembered anew the strange beauty of the house. The outside of it, of course, for he hadn't been inside. There had been no question of that, no question of it whatsoever. Then, as the dingy outlines of his bed-sitting room began to take shape in the growing light, he experienced the disillusion of the dreamer. Perhaps, after all, his dream hadn't been so very wonderful, or had the wonderful, the explanatory part, slipped past him, and laughed at his ineffectual clutching hands. A white house. Standing on high ground, there wasn't much there to get excited about. Surely, it was rather a big house. He remembered, with a lot of windows in it, and the blinds were all down. Not because the people were away, he was sure of that, but because it was so early that no one was up yet. Then he laughed at the absurdity of his imaginings, and remembered that he was to dine with Mr. Wetterman that night. Maisie Wetterman was Rudolph Wetterman's only daughter, and she had been accustomed all her life to having exactly what she wanted. Paying a visit to her father's office one day, she had noticed John Segrave. He had brought in some letters that her father had asked for. When he had departed again, she asked her father about him. Wetterman was communicative. One of Sir Edward Segrave's sons. Fine old family, but on its last legs. This boy will never set the Thames on fire. I like him all right, but there's nothing to him. No punch of any kind. Maisie was, perhaps, indifferent to punch. It was a quality valued more by her parent than herself. Anyway, a fortnight later, she persuaded her father to ask John Segrave to dinner. It was an intimate dinner, herself and her father, John Segrave, and a girlfriend who was staying with her. The girlfriend was moved to make a few remarks. On approval, I suppose. Maisie later. Father will do it up in a nice little parcel and bring it home from the city as a present to his dear little daughter. Duly bought and paid for. Allegra, you are the limit. Allegra Kerr laughed. You do take fancies, you know. Maisie. I like that hat, I must have it. If hats, why not husbands? Don't be absurd. I've hardly spoken to him yet. No, but you've made up your mind, said the other girl. What's the attraction, Maisie? I don't know, said Maisie Wetterman slowly. He's different. Different. Yes, I can't explain. He's good-looking, you know, in a queer sort of way. But it's not that. He's a way of not seeing you're there, really. I don't believe he as much as glanced at me that day in Father's office. Allegra laughed. That's an old trick. Rather an astute young man, I should say. Allegra, you're hateful. Cheer up. Darling, Father will buy a woolly lamb for his little Maisiekins. I don't want it to be like that. Love with a capital L. Is that it? Why shouldn't he fall in love with me? No reason at all. I expect he will. Allegra smiled as she spoke, and let her glance sweep over the other. Maisie Wetterman was short inclined to be plump. She had dark hair, well shingled and artistically waved. Her naturally good complexion was enhanced by the latest colors in powder and lipstick. She had a good mouth and teeth. Dark eyes, rather small and twinkly, and a jaw and chin slightly on the heavy side. She was beautifully dressed. Yes, said Allegra, finishing her scrutiny. I've no doubt he will. The whole effect is really very good. Maisie, her friend looked at her doubtfully. I mean it, said Allegra. I mean it, honor bright. But just supposing, for the sake of argument, that he shouldn't fall in love. I mean, suppose his affection was to become sincere, but platonic. What then? I may not like him at all when I know him better. Quite so. On the other hand, you may like him very much indeed. And in that latter case, Maisie shrugged her shoulders. I should hope I've too much pride, Allegra interrupted. Pride comes in handy for masking one's feelings. It doesn't stop you from feeling them. Well, said Maisie, flushed. I don't see why I shouldn't say it. I am a very good match. I mean, from his point of view, father's daughter and everything. Partnership in the offing, etc., said Allegra. Yes, Maisie. Your father's daughter. All right. I'm awfully pleased. I do like my friends to run true to type. The faint mockery of her tone made the other uneasy. You are hateful, Allegra, but stimulating, darling. That's why you have me here. I'm a student of history, you know, and it always intrigued me why the court jester was permitted and encouraged. Now that I'm one myself, I see the point. It's rather a good role. You see, I had to do something. There was I, proud and penniless, like the heroine of a novelette, well-born and badly educated. What to do? Girl God wot, saith she, the poor relation type of girl, all willingness to do without a fire in her room, and content to do odd jobs and help dear cousin so-and-so. I observe to be at a premium. Nobody really wants her, except those people who can't keep their servants, and they treat her like a galley slave. So I became the court fool. Insolence, plain speaking, a dash of wit now and again, not too much, lest I should have to live up to it. And behind it all, a very shrewd observation of human nature. People rather like being told how horrible they really are. That's why they flock to popular preachers. It's been a great success. I'm always overwhelmed with invitations. I can live on my friends with the greatest ease, and I'm careful to make no pretense of gratitude. There's no one quite like you, Allegra. You don't mind in the least what you say. That's where you're wrong. I mind very much. I take care and thought about the matter. My seeming outspokenness is always calculated. I've got to be careful. This job has got to carry me on to old age. Why not marry? I know heaps of people have asked you. Allegra's face grew suddenly hard. I can never marry because Maisie left the sentence unfinished. Looking at her friend, the latter gave a short nod of assent. Footsteps were heard on the stairs. The butler threw open the door and announced, Mr. Segrave. John came in without any particular enthusiasm. He couldn't imagine why the old boy had asked him. If he could have got out of it, he would have done so. The house depressed him, with its solid magnificence and the soft pile of its carpet. A girl came forward and shook hands with him. He remembered vaguely having seen her one day in her father's office. How do you do? Mr. Segrave, Mr. Segrave, Miss Kerr. Then he woke. Who was she? Where did she come from? From the flame-colored draperies that floated round her, to the tiny mercury wings on her small Greek head. She was a being transitory and fugitive, standing out against the dull background with an effect of unreality. Rudolph Wetterman came in, his broad expanse of gleaming shirt front creaking as he walked. They went down informally to dinner. Allegra Kerr talked to her host. John Segrave had to devote himself to Maisie, but his whole mind was on the girl on the other side of him. She was marvelously effective. Her effectiveness was, he thought, more studied than natural. But behind all that, there lay something else. Flickering fire, fitful, capricious, like the will-o'-the-wisps that of old lured men into the marshes. At last he got a chance to speak to her. Maisie was giving her father a message from some friend she had met that day. Now that the moment had come, he was tongue-tied. His glance pleaded with her dumbly. "Dinner table topics?" she said lightly. "Shall we start with the theaters? Or with one of those innumerable openings beginning? Do you like—" John laughed. "And if we find we both like dogs and dislike sandy cats, it will form what is called a bond between us." "Assuredly," said Allegra gravely. "It is, I think, a pity to begin with a catechism. Yet it puts conversation within the reach of all. True, but with disastrous results. It is useful to know the rules, if only to break them." John smiled at her. "I take it, then, that you and I will indulge our personal vagaries, even though we display thereby the genius that is akin to madness." With a sharp, unguarded movement, the girl's hand swept a wine glass off the table. There was the tinkle of broken glass. Maisie and her father stopped speaking. "I'm so sorry. Mr. Wetterman, I'm throwing glasses on the floor." "My dear Allegra, it doesn't matter at all. Not at all." Beneath his breath, John Segrave said quickly, "Broken glass. That's bad luck. I wish it hadn't happened." "Don't worry. How does it go? Ill luck thou canst not bring where ill luck has its home." She turned once more to Wetterman. John, resuming conversation with Maisie, tried to place the quotation. He got it at last. They were the words used by Sieglinde in the Walküre when Sigmund offers to leave the house. He thought, did she mean? But Maisie was asking his opinion of the latest review. Soon he had admitted that he was fond of music. "After dinner," said Maisie, "we'll make Allegra play for us." They all went up to the drawing-room together. Secretly, Wetterman considered it a barbarous custom. He liked the ponderous gravity of the wine passing round, the handed cigars, but perhaps it was as well tonight. He didn't know what on earth he could find to say to young Segrave. Maisie was too bad with her whims. It wasn't as though the fellow were good-looking, really good-looking, and certainly he wasn't amusing. He was glad when Maisie asked Allegra Kerr to play. They'd get through the evening sooner. The young idiot didn't even play bridge. Allegra played well, though without the sure touch of a professional. She played modern music, Debussy and Strauss, a little Scriabin. Then she dropped into the first movement of Beethoven's Pathétique, that expression of a grief that is infinite, a sorrow that is endless and vast as the ages, but in which from end to end breathes the spirit that will not accept defeat. In the solemnity of undying woe, it moves with the rhythm of the conqueror to its final doom. Towards the end, she faltered. Her fingers struck a discord, and she broke off abruptly. She looked across at Maisie and laughed mockingly. "You see," she said, "they won't let me." Then, without waiting for a reply to her somewhat enigmatical remark, she plunged into a strange, haunting melody, a thing of weird harmonies and curious measured rhythm, quite unlike anything Segrave had ever heard before. It was delicate as the flight of a bird, poised, hovering suddenly, without the least warning. It turned into a mere discordant jangle of notes, and Allegra rose laughing from the piano. In spite of her laugh, she looked disturbed and almost frightened. She sat down by Maisie, and John heard the latter say in a low tone to her, "You shouldn't do it. You really shouldn't do it." "What was the last thing?" John asked eagerly. "Something of my own." She spoke sharply and curtly. Wetterman changed the subject. That night, John Segrave dreamt again of the house. John was unhappy. His life was irksome to him as never before. Up to now, he had accepted it patiently, a disagreeable necessity, but one which left his inner freedom essentially untouched. Now, all that was changed. The outer world and the inner intermingled. He did not disguise to himself the reason for the change. He had fallen in love at first sight with Allegra Kerr. What was he going to do about it? He had been too bewildered that first night to make any plans. He had not even tried to see her again. A little later, when Maisie Wetterman asked him down to her father's place in the country for a weekend, he went eagerly, but he was disappointed, for Allegra was not there. He mentioned her once, tentatively, to Maisie, and she told him that Allegra was up in Scotland paying a visit. He left it at that. He would have liked to go on talking about her, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. Maisie was puzzled by him that weekend. He didn't appear to see, well, to see what was so plainly to be seen. She was a direct young woman in her methods, but directness was lost upon John. He thought her kind, but a little overpowering. Yet the fates were stronger than Maisie. They willed that John should see Allegra again. They met in the park one Sunday afternoon. He had seen her from far off, and his heart thumped against the side of his ribs. Supposing she should have forgotten him, but she had not forgotten. She stopped and spoke. In a few minutes, they were walking side by side, striking out across the grass. He was ridiculously happy. He said suddenly and unexpectedly, "Do you believe in dreams?" "I believe in nightmares." The harshness of her voice startled him. "Nightmares," he said stupidly. "I didn't mean nightmares." Allegra looked at him. "No," she said. "There have been no nightmares in your life." "I can see that." Her voice was gentle, different. He told her then of his dream of the White House, stammering a little. He had had it now, 7 times. Always the same. It was beautiful. So beautiful. He went on, "You see, it's to do with you. In some way. I had it first the night before I met you. To do with me." She laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, no. That's impossible. The house was beautiful." "So are you," said John Segrave. Allegra flushed a little with annoyance. "I'm sorry. I was stupid. I seemed to ask for a compliment, didn't I? But I didn't really mean that at all. The outside of me is all right. I know." "I haven't seen the inside of the house yet," said John Segrave. "When I do, I know it will be quite as beautiful as the outside." He spoke slowly and gravely, giving the words a meaning that she chose to ignore. "There is something more I want to tell you, if you will listen." "I will listen," said Allegra. "I am chucking up this job of mine. I ought to have done it long ago. I see that now. I have been content to drift along knowing I was an utter failure, without caring much, just living from day to day. A man shouldn't do that. It's a man's business to manage something he can do and make a success of it. I'm chucking this and taking on something else, quite a different sort of thing. It's a kind of expedition in West Africa. I can't tell you the details. They're not supposed to be known. But if it comes off well, I shall be a rich man. So, you too, count success in terms of money. Money, said John Segrave, means just one thing to me. You, when I come back. He paused. She bent her head. Her face had grown very pale. I won't pretend to misunderstand. That's why I must tell you now. Once and for all, I shall never marry. He stayed a little while considering. Then he said very gently, Can't you tell me why? I could, but more than anything in the world, I do not want to tell you. Again, he was silent. Then he looked up suddenly, and a singularly attractive smile illumined his fawn's face. I see, he said. So you won't let me come inside the house, not even to peep in for a second. The blinds are to stay down. Allegra leaned forward and laid her hand on his. I will tell you this much. You dream of your house, but I don't dream. My dreams are nightmares. And on that, she left him, abruptly, disconcertingly. That night, once more, he dreamed. Of late, he had realized that the house was most certainly tenanted. He had seen a hand draw aside the blinds, had caught glimpses of moving figures within. Tonight, the house seemed fairer than it had ever done before. Its white walls shone in the sunlight. The peace and the beauty of it were complete. Then, suddenly, he became aware of a fuller ripple of the waves of joy. Someone was coming to the window. He knew it. A hand, the same hand that he had seen before, laid hold of the blind, drawing it back. In a minute, he would see. He was awake, still quivering with the horror, the unutterable loathing of the thing that had looked out at him from the window of the house. It was a thing, utterly and wholly horrible, a thing so vile and loathsome that the mere remembrance of it made him feel sick, and he knew that the most unutterably and horribly vile thing about it was its presence in that house, the house of beauty. For where that thing abode was horror that rose up and slew the peace and the serenity which were the birthright of the house. The beauty, the wonderful immortal beauty of the house, was destroyed forever. For within its holy consecrated walls there dwelt the shadow of an unclean thing. If ever again he should dream of the house, Segrave knew he would awake at once with a start of terror, lest from its white beauty that thing might suddenly look out at him. The following evening, when he left the office, he went straight to the Wetterman's house. He must see Allegra Kerr. Maisie would tell him where she was to be found. He never noticed the eager light that flashed into Maisie's eyes as he was shown in, and she jumped up to greet him. He stammered out his request at once, with her hand still in his. Miss Kerr, I met her yesterday, but I don't know where she's staying. He did not feel Maisie's hand grow limp in his as she withdrew it. The sudden coldness of her voice told him nothing. Allegra is here staying with but I'm afraid you can't see her. But You see, her mother died this morning. We've just had the news. Oh, he was taken aback. It is all very sad, said Maisie. She hesitated just a minute, then went on. You see, she died in, well, practically an asylum. There's insanity in the family. The grandfather shot himself, and one of Allegra's aunts is a hopeless imbecile, and another drowned herself. John Segrave made an inarticulate sound. I thought I ought to tell you, said Maisie virtuously. We're such friends, aren't we? And of course, Allegra is very attractive. Lots of people have asked her to marry them. But naturally, she won't marry at all. She couldn't, could she? She's all right, said Segrave. There's nothing wrong with her. His voice sounded hoarse and unnatural in his own ears. One never knows. Her mother was quite all right when she was young. And she wasn't just peculiar, you know. She was quite raving mad. It's a dreadful thing, insanity. Yes, he said. It's a most awful thing. He knew now what it was that had looked at him from the window of the house. Maisie was still talking on. He interrupted her brusquely. I really came to say goodbye and to thank you for all your kindness. You're not going away. There was alarm in her voice. He smiled sideways at her, a crooked smile, pathetic and attractive. Yes, he said, to Africa. Africa. Maisie echoed the word blankly. Before she could pull herself together, he had shaken her by the hand and gone. She was left standing there, her hands clenched by her sides, an angry spot of color in each cheek. Below, on the doorstep, John Segrave came face to face with Allegra coming in from the street. She was in black, her face white and lifeless. She took one glance at him, then drew him into a small morning room. Maisie told you, she said. You know. He nodded. But what does it matter? You're all right. It leaves some people out. She looked at him somberly, mournfully. You are all right, he repeated. I don't know. She almost whispered it. I don't know. I told you about my dreams. And when I play, when I'm at the piano, those others come and take hold of my hands. He was staring at her, paralyzed. For one instant, as she spoke, something looked out from her eyes. It was gone in a flash, but he knew it. It was the thing that had looked out from the house. She caught his momentary recoil. You see? She whispered. You see? But I wish Maisie hadn't told you. It takes everything from you. Everything. Yes, there won't even be the dreams left. For now, you'll never dare to dream of the house again. The West African sun poured down, and the heat was intense. John Segrave continued to moan. I can't find it. I can't find it. The little English doctor, with the red head and the tremendous jaw, scowled down upon his patient in that bullying manner which he had made his own. He's always saying that. What does he mean? He speaks, I think, of a house, monsieur. The soft-voiced Sister of Charity from the Roman Catholic mission spoke with her gentle detachment, as she, too, looked down on the stricken man. A house, eh? Well, he's got to get it out of his head, or we shan't pull him through. It's on his mind. Segrave, Segrave. The wandering attention was fixed. The eyes rested with recognition on the doctor's face. Look here. You're going to pull through. I'm going to pull you through. But you've got to stop worrying about this house. It can't run away, you know. So don't bother about looking for it now. All right. He seemed obedient. I suppose it can't very well run away if it's never been there at all. Of course not. The doctor laughed his cheery laugh. Now you'll be all right in no time. And with a boisterous bluntness of manner, he took his departure. Segrave lay thinking. The fever had abated for the moment, and he could think clearly and lucidly. He must find that house. For 10 years he had dreaded finding it. The thought that he might come upon it unawares had been his greatest terror, and then he remembered, when his fears were quite lulled to rest. One day it had found him. He recalled clearly his first haunting terror, and then his sudden, his exquisite relief. For, after all, the house was empty, quite empty and exquisitely peaceful. It was as he remembered it 10 years before. He had not forgotten. There was a huge black furniture van moving slowly away from the house. The last tenant, of course, moving out with his goods. He went up to the men in charge of the van and spoke to them. There was something rather sinister about that van. It was so very black. The horses were black, too, with freely flowing manes and tails, and the men all wore black clothes and gloves. It all reminded him of something else, something that he couldn't remember. Yes, he had been quite right. The last tenant was moving out, as his lease was up. The house was to stand empty for the present until the owner came back from abroad and waking. He had been full of the peaceful beauty of the empty house. A month after that, he had received a letter from Maisie. She wrote to him perseveringly, once a month. In it she told him that Allegra Kerr had died in the same home as her mother. And wasn't it dreadfully sad? Though of course a merciful release. It had really been very odd indeed, coming after his dream like that. He didn't quite understand it all, but it was odd. And the worst of it was that he'd never been able to find the house since. Somehow, he'd forgotten the way. The fever began to take hold of him once more. He tossed restlessly. Of course, he'd forgotten. The house was on high ground. He must climb to get there. But it was hot work, climbing cliffs dreadfully hot. Up, up, up. Oh, he had slipped. He must start again from the bottom. Up, up, up. Days passed, weeks. He wasn't sure that years didn't go by. And he was still climbing. Once he heard the doctor's voice, but he couldn't stop climbing to listen. Besides, the doctor would tell him to leave off looking for the house. He thought it was an ordinary house. He didn't know. He remembered suddenly that he must be calm, very calm. You couldn't find the house unless you were very calm. It was no use looking for the house in a hurry, or being excited. If he could only keep calm. But it was so hot. Hot. It was cold. Yes, cold. These weren't cliffs. They were icebergs, jagged cold. Icebergs. He was so tired, he wouldn't go on looking. It was no good. Here was a lane that was better than icebergs. Anyway, how pleasant and shady it was in the cool, green lane. And those trees, they were splendid. They were rather like what? He couldn't remember, but it didn't matter. Ah, here were flowers, all golden and blue. How lovely it all was, and how strangely familiar. Of course, he had been here before. There, through the trees, was the gleam of the house, standing on the high ground. How beautiful it was! The green lane and the trees and the flowers were as nothing to the paramount, the all-satisfying beauty of the house. He hastened his steps, to think that he had never yet been inside. How unbelievably stupid of him, when he had the key in his pocket all the time, and of course the beauty of the exterior was as nothing to the beauty that lay within, especially now that the owner had come back from abroad. He mounted the steps to the great door. Cruel, strong hands were dragging him back. They fought him, dragging him to and fro, backwards and forwards. The doctor was shaking him, roaring in his ear. "Hold on, man, you can... Don't let go! Don't let go!" His eyes were alight with the fierceness of one who sees an enemy. Segrave wondered who the enemy was. The black-robed nun was praying. That, too, was strange, and all he wanted was to be left alone, to go back to the house. For every minute the house was growing fainter. That, of course, was because the doctor was so strong. He wasn't strong enough to fight the doctor. If he only could but stop. There was another way, the way dreams went in the moment of waking. No strength could stop them. They just flitted past. The doctor's hands wouldn't be able to hold him if he slipped, just slipped. Yeah, that was the way. The white walls were visible once more. The doctor's voice was fainter. His hands were barely felt. He knew now how dreams laugh when they give you the slip. He was at the door of the house. The exquisite stillness was unbroken. He put the key in the lock and turned it. Just a moment, he waited, to realize to the full the perfect, the ineffable, the all-satisfying completeness of joy. Then he passed over the threshold. Chapter 2. The shabby man in the fourth row of the pit leant forward and stared incredulously at the stage. His shifty eyes narrowed furtively. "Nancy Taylor," he muttered. "By the Lord, little Nancy Taylor." His glance dropped to the program in his hand. One name was printed in slightly larger type than the rest. Olga Stormer. So that's what she calls herself. Fancy yourself a star, don't you? My lady. And you must be making a pretty little pot of money, too. Quite forgotten your name was ever Nancy Taylor. I dare say. I wonder now what you'd say if Jake Levitt should remind you of the fact. The curtain fell on the close of the first act. Hearty applause filled the auditorium. Olga Stormer, the great emotional actress, whose name in a few short years had become a household word, was adding yet another triumph to her list of successes as Cora in The Avenging Angel. Jake Levitt did not join in the clapping, but a slow, appreciative grin gradually distended his mouth. God, what luck! Just when he was on his beam ends. 2. She'd try to bluff it out, he supposed, but she couldn't put it over on him. Properly worked. The thing was a gold mine. On the following morning, the first workings of Jake Levitt's gold mine became apparent. In her drawing room, with its red lacquer and black hangings, Olga Stormer read and reread a letter thoughtfully. Her pale face, with its exquisitely mobile features, was a little more set than usual, and every now and then the gray-green eyes under the level brows steadily envisaged the middle distance, as though she contemplated the threat behind rather than the actual words of the letter. In that wonderful voice of hers, which could throb with emotion or be as clear-cut as the click of a typewriter, Olga called Miss Jones, a neat young woman with spectacles, a shorthand pad, and a pencil clasped in her hand, hastened from an adjoining room. "Ring up Mr. Danahan, please, and ask him to come round immediately." Sid Danahan, Olga Stormer's manager, entered the room with the usual apprehension of the man whose life it is to deal with and overcome the vagaries of the artistic feminine, to coax, to soothe, to bully, one at a time or all together. Such was his daily routine. To his relief, Olga appeared calm and composed, and merely flicked a note across the table to him. "Read that." The letter was scrawled in an illiterate hand on cheap paper. "Dear Madam, I much appreciated your performance in The Avenging Angel last night. I fancy we have a mutual friend in Miss Nancy Taylor, late of Chicago. An article regarding her is to be published shortly, if you would care to discuss same. I could call upon you at any time convenient to yourself. Yours respectfully, Jake Levitt." Danahan looked slightly bewildered. "I don't quite get it. Who is this Nancy Taylor? A girl who would be better dead? Danny?" There was bitterness in her voice and a weariness that revealed her 34 years. A girl who was dead until this carrion crow brought her to life again. "Oh, then, me, Danny. Just me? This means blackmail. Of course." She nodded. "Of course. And by a man who knows the art thoroughly." Danahan frowned, considering the matter. Olga, her cheek pillowed on a long, slender hand, watched him with unfathomable eyes. "What about Bluff deny everything? He can't be sure that he hasn't been misled by a chance resemblance." Olga shook her head. "Levitt makes his living by blackmailing women." "He's sure enough." "The police," hinted Danahan doubtfully. Her faint, derisive smile was answer enough, beneath her self-control, though he did not guess it, was the impatience of the keen brain watching a slower brain laboriously cover the ground it had already traversed in a flash. "You don't think it might be wise for you to say something yourself to Sir Richard? That would partly spike his guns." The actress's engagement to Sir Richard Everard, MP, had been announced a few weeks previously. "I told Richard everything when he asked me to marry him." "My word, that was clever of you," said Danahan admiringly. Olga smiled a little. "It wasn't cleverness. Danny, dear, you wouldn't understand. All the same, if this man Levitt does what he threatens, my number is up. And incidentally, Richard's parliamentary career goes smash, too. No, as far as I can see, there are only two things to do. Well, to pay, and that of course is endless, or to disappear. Start again." The weariness was again very apparent in her voice. "It isn't even as though I'd done anything I regretted. I was a half-starved little gutter waif, Danny, striving to keep straight. I shot a man, a beast of a man who deserved to be shot. The circumstances under which I killed him were such that no jury on earth would have convicted me. I know that now, but at the time I was only a frightened kid, and I ran." Danahan nodded. "I suppose," he said doubtfully, "there's nothing against this man Levitt we could get hold of. Olga shook her head. Very unlikely. He's too much of a coward to go in for evil doing. The sound of her own words seemed to strike her. A coward. I wonder if we couldn't work on that in some way. If Sir Richard were to see him and frighten him, suggested Danahan. Richard is too fine an instrument. You can't handle that sort of man with gloves on. Well, let me see him. Forgive me, Danny, but I don't think you're subtle enough. Something between gloves and bare fists is needed. Let us say mittens. That means a woman. Yes, I rather fancy a woman might do the trick. A woman with a certain amount of finesse. But who knows the baser side of life from bitter experience? Olga Stormer, for instance. Don't talk to me. I've got a plan coming. She leant forward, burying her face in her hands. She lifted it suddenly. What's the name of that girl who wants to understudy me, Margaret Ryan? Isn't it the girl with the hair like mine? Her hair's all right, admitted Danahan grudgingly, his eyes resting on the bronze gold coil surrounding Olga's head. It's just like yours, as you say. But she's no good any other way. I was going to sack her next week. If all goes well, you'll probably have to let her understudy Cora. She smothered his protests with a wave of her hand. Danny, answer me one question honestly. Do you think I can really act? I mean, or am I just an attractive woman who trails round in pretty dresses? Act, my God! Olga, there's been nobody like you since Deuce. Then if Levitt is really a coward, as I suspect, the thing will come off. No, I'm not going to tell you about it. I want you to get hold of the Ryan girl. Tell her I'm interested in her and want her to dine here tomorrow night. She'll come fast enough. I should say she would. The other thing I want is some good, strong knockout drops. Something that will put anyone out of action for an hour or two, but leave them none the worse the next day. Danahan grinned. I can't guarantee our friend won't have a headache, but there will be no permanent damage done. Good. Run away now, Danny, and leave the rest to me. She raised her voice. Miss Jones? The spectacled young woman appeared with her usual alacrity. Take down this, please. Walking slowly up and down, Olga dictated the day's correspondence, but one answer she wrote with her own hand. Jake Levitt. In his dingy room, grinned as he tore open the expected envelope. Dear Sir, I cannot recall the lady of whom you speak, but I meet so many people that my memory is necessarily uncertain. I am always pleased to help any fellow actress, and shall be at home if you will call this evening at 9 o'clock. Yours faithfully, Olga Stormer. Levitt nodded appreciatively. Clever note. She admitted nothing. Nevertheless, she was willing to treat. The gold mine was developing. At 9 o'clock precisely, Levitt stood outside the door of the actress's flat and pressed the bell. No one answered the summons, and he was about to press it again when he realized that the door was not latched. He pushed the door open and entered the hall. To his right was an open door leading into a brilliantly lighted room, a room decorated in scarlet and black. Levitt walked in. On the table under the lamp lay a sheet of paper on which were written the words, Please wait until I return. O. Stormer. Levitt sat down and waited. In spite of himself, a feeling of uneasiness was stealing over him. The flat was so very quiet. There was something eerie about the silence. Nothing wrong. Of course, how could there be? But the room was so deadly quiet. And yet, quiet as it was, he had the preposterous, uncomfortable notion that he wasn't alone in it. Absurd. He wiped the perspiration from his brow, and still the impression grew stronger. He wasn't alone. With a muttered oath, he sprang up and began to pace up and down. In a minute, the woman would return, and then he stopped dead with a muffled cry. From beneath the black velvet hangings that draped the window, a hand protruded. He stooped and touched it. Cold, horribly cold, a dead hand. With a cry, he flung back the curtains. A woman was lying there, one arm flung wide, the other doubled under her as she lay face downwards, her golden bronze hair lying in disheveled masses on her neck. Olga Stormer. Tremblingly, his fingers sought the ico-cold coldness of that wrist and felt for the pulse. As he thought, there was none. She was dead. She had escaped him. Then, by taking the simplest way out. Suddenly, his eyes were arrested by two ends of red cord, finishing in fantastic tassels, and half hidden by the masses of her hair. He touched them gingerly. The head sagged as he did so, and he caught a glimpse of a horrible purple face. He sprang back with a cry, his head whirling. There was something here he did not understand. His brief glimpse of the face, disfigured as it was, had shown him one thing. This was murder, not suicide. The woman had been strangled, and she was not Olga Stormer. Ah, what was that? A sound behind him. He wheeled round and looked straight into the terrified eyes of a maidservant crouching against the wall. Her face was as white as the cap and apron she wore. But he did not understand the fascinated horror in her eyes until her half-breathed words enlightened him to the peril in which he stood. "Oh, my Gord, you've killed her!" Even then, he did not quite realize. He replied, "No, no. She was dead when I found her." "I saw you do it. You pulled the cord and strangled her. I heard the gurgling cry she give." The sweat broke out upon his brow in earnest. His mind went rapidly over his actions of the previous few minutes. She must have come in just as he had the two ends of cord in his hands. She had seen the sagging head and had taken his own cry as coming from the victim. He stared at her helplessly. There was no doubting what he saw in her face, terror and stupidity. She would tell the police she had seen the crime committed, and no cross-examination would shake her. He was sure of that. She would swear away his life with the unshakable conviction that she was speaking the truth. What a horrible, unforeseen chain of circumstances. Stop. Was it unforeseen? Was there some devilry here? On an impulse, he said, eyeing her narrowly, "That's not your mistress, you know." Her answer, given mechanically, threw a light upon the situation. "No, it's her actress friend, if you can call 'em friends. Seeing that they fought like cat and dog, they were at it tonight. Hammer and tongs. A trap. He saw it now. Where's your mistress?" "Went out 10 minutes ago. A trap." And he had walked into it like a lamb. A clever devil. This Olga Stormer, she had rid herself of a rival, and he was to suffer for the deed. Murder, my God. They hanged a man for murder. And he was innocent. Innocent. A stealthy rustle recalled him. The little maid was sidling towards the door. Her wits were beginning to work again. Her eyes wavered to the telephone, then back to the door. At all costs, he must silence her. It was the only way, as well hang for a real crime as a fictitious one. She had no weapon. Neither had he, but he had his hands. Then his heart gave a leap. On the table beside her, almost under her hand, lay a small jeweled revolver. If he could reach it first, instinct or his eyes warned her, she caught it up as he sprang and held it pointed at his breast. Awkwardly, as she held it, her finger was on the trigger, and she could hardly miss him at that distance. He stopped dead. A revolver belonging to a woman like Olga Stormer would be pretty sure to be loaded. But there was one thing. She was no longer directly between him and the door. So long as he did not attack her, she might not have the nerve to shoot. Anyway, he must risk it. Zigzagging, he ran for the door, through the hall, and out through the outer door. Banging it behind him, he heard her voice, faint and shaky, calling, "Police! Murder!" She'd have to call louder than that before anyone was likely to hear her. He'd got to start. Anyway, down the stairs he went, running down the open street, then slacking to a walk as a stray pedestrian turned the corner. He had his plan cut and dried. To Gravesend as quickly as possible. A boat was sailing from there that night for the remoter parts of the world. He knew the captain, a man who, for a consideration, would ask no question. Once on board and out to sea, he would be safe. At 11 o'clock, Danahan's telephone rang. Olga's voice spoke. "Prepare a contract for Miss Ryan. Will you?" "She's to understudy Cora?" It's absolutely no use arguing. "I owe her something after all the things I did to her tonight." "What?" "Yes. I think I'm out of my troubles. By the way, if she tells you tomorrow that I'm an ardent spiritualist and put her into a trance tonight, don't show open incredulity. How knockout drops in the coffee, followed by scientific passes. After that, I painted her face with purple grease paint and put a tourniquet on her left arm, mystified. Well, you must stay mystified until tomorrow. I haven't time to explain now. I must get out of the cap and apron before my faithful Maud returns from the pictures. There was a beautiful drama on tonight, she told me. But she missed the best drama of all. I played my best part tonight. Danny, the mittens won. Jake Levitt is a coward, all right. And oh, Danny, I'm an actress. Chapter 3. Claire Halliwell walked down the short path that led from her cottage door to the gate. On her arm was a basket, and in the basket was a bottle of soup, some homemade jelly, and a few grapes. There were not many poor people in the small village of Damer's End, but such as there were assiduously looked after. And Claire was one of the most efficient of the parish workers. Claire Halliwell was the 32. She had an upright carriage, a healthy color, and nice brown eyes. She was not beautiful, but she looked fresh and pleasant and very English. Everybody liked her and said she was a good sort. Since her mother's death, 2 years ago, she had lived alone in the cottage with her dog, Rover. She kept poultry and was fond of animals and of a healthy outdoor life. As she unlatched the gate, a 2-seater car swept past, and the driver, a girl in a red hat, waved a greeting. Claire responded, but for a moment her lips tightened. She felt that pang at her heart, which always came when she saw Vivian Lee, Gerald's wife, Meddenham Grange, which lay just a mile outside the village, had belonged to the Lees for many generations. Sir Gerald Lee, the present owner of the Grange, was a man old for his years and considered by many stiff in manner. His pomposity really covered a good deal of shyness. He and Claire had played together as children. Later, they had been friends, and a closer and dearer tie had been confidently expected by many, including, it may be said, Claire herself. There was no hurry, of course, but some day. She left it so, in her own mind. Some day. And then, just a year ago, the village had been startled by the news of Sir Gerald's marriage to a Miss Harper, a girl nobody had ever heard of. The new Lady Lee had not been popular in the village. She took not the faintest interest in parochial matters, was bored by hunting, and loathed the country and outdoor sports. Because many of the wiseacres shook their heads and wondered how it would end. It was easy to see where Sir Gerald's infatuation had come in. Vivian was a beauty. From head to foot, she was a complete contrast to Claire Halliwell, small, elfin, dainty, with golden red hair that curled enchantingly over her pretty ears, and big violet eyes that could shoot a sideways glance of provocation to the manner born. Gerald Lee, in his simple man's way, had been anxious that his wife and Claire should be great friends. Claire was often asked to dine at the Grange, and Vivian made a pretty pretense of affectionate intimacy whenever they met. Hence that gay salutation of hers this morning. Claire walked on and did her errand. The vicar was also visiting the old woman in question, and he and Claire walked a few yards together afterwards before their ways parted. They stood still for a minute discussing parish affairs. "Jones has broken out again, I'm afraid," said the vicar. "And I had such hopes after he had volunteered, of his own accord, to take the pledge." "Disgusting," said Claire crisply. "It seems so to us," said Mr. Wilmot, "but we must remember that it is very hard to put ourselves in his place and realize his temptation. The desire for drink is unaccountable to us, but we all have our own temptations, and thus we can understand." "I suppose we have," said Claire uncertainly. The vicar glanced at her. "Some of us have the good fortune to be very little tempted," he said gently. "But even to those people their hour comes. Watch and pray. Remember that ye enter not into temptation." Then bidding her goodbye, he walked briskly away. Claire went on thoughtfully, and presently she almost bumped into Sir Gerald Lee. "Hello, Claire. I was hoping to run across you. You look jolly fit. What a color you've got." The color had not been there a minute before. Lee went on. "As I say, I was hoping to run across you. Vivian's got to go off to Bournemouth for the weekend. Her mother's not well. Can you dine with us Tuesday instead of tonight?" "Oh, yes, Tuesday will suit me just as well." "That's all right. Then, splendid. I must hurry along." Claire went home to find her one faithful domestic standing on the doorstep, looking out for her. "There you are, miss. Such a to-do. They've brought Rover home. He went off on his own this morning, and a car ran clean over him." Claire hurried to the dog's Segrave. She adored animals, and Rover was her especial darling. She felt his legs one by one, and then ran her hands over his body. He groaned once or twice and licked her hand. "If there's any serious injury, it's internal," she said at last. "No bones seem to be broken. Shall we get the vet to see him, miss?" Claire shook her head. She had little faith in the local vet. We'll wait until tomorrow. He doesn't seem to be in great pain, and his gums are a good color, so there can't be much internal bleeding. Tomorrow, if I don't like the look of him, I'll take him over to Skippington in the car and let Reeves have a look at him. He's far and away the best man. On the following day, Rover seemed weaker, and Claire duly carried out her project. The small town of Skippington was about 40 miles away, a long run, but Reeves, the vet there, was celebrated for many miles round. He diagnosed certain internal injuries, but held out good hopes of recovery, and Claire went away quite content to leave Rover in his charge. There was only one hotel of any pretensions in Skippington, the County Arms. It was mainly frequented by commercial travelers, for there was no good hunting country near Skippington, and it was off the track of the main roads for motorists. Lunch was not served till 1 o'clock, and as it wanted a few minutes of that hour, Claire amused herself by glancing over the entries in the open visitor's book. Suddenly, she gave a stifled exclamation. Surely she knew that handwriting, with its loops and whirls and flourishes. She had always considered it unmistakable. Even now she could have sworn, but of course it was clearly impossible. Vivian Lee was at Bournemouth. The entry itself showed it to be impossible, Mr. and Mrs. Cyril Brown, London. But in spite of herself, her eyes strayed back again and again to that curly writing. And on an impulse she could not quite define, she asked abruptly of the woman in the office, "Mrs. Cyril Brown, I wonder if that is the same one I know." A small lady, reddish hair. Very pretty. She came in a red two-seater car. Madam, a Peugeot. I believe. Then it was, a coincidence would be too remarkable. As if in a dream. She heard the woman go on. They were here just over a month ago for a weekend, and liked it so much that they have come again, newly married. I should fancy. Claire heard herself saying, "Thank you. I don't think that could be my friend." Her voice sounded different, as though it belonged to someone else. Presently, she was sitting in the dining room, quietly eating cold roast beef, her mind a maze of conflicting thought and emotions. She had no doubts whatever. She had summed Vivian up pretty correctly on their first meeting. Vivian was that kind. She wondered vaguely who the man was. Someone Vivian had known before her marriage. Very likely. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. But Gerald, what was she, Claire, to do about Gerald? He ought to know. Surely he ought to know. It was clearly her duty to tell him. She had discovered Vivian's secret by accident, but she must lose no time in acquainting Gerald with the facts. She was Gerald's friend, not Vivian's. But somehow or other, she felt uncomfortable. Her conscience was not satisfied. On the face of it, her reasoning was good, but duty and inclination jumped suspiciously together. She admitted to herself that she disliked Vivian. Besides, if Gerald Lee were to divorce his wife, and Claire had no doubts at all that that was exactly what he would do. He was a man with an almost fanatical view of his own honor, then well. The way would lie open for Gerald to come to her. Put like that, she shrank back fastidiously. Her own proposed action seemed naked and ugly. The personal element entered in. Too much. She could not be sure of her own motives. Claire was essentially a high-minded, conscientious woman. She strove now, very earnestly, to see where her duty lay. She wished, as she had always wished, to do right. What was right in this case? What was wrong? By a pure accident, she had come into possession of facts that affected vitally the man she loved and the woman whom she disliked. And yes, one might as well be frank, of whom she was bitterly jealous. She could ruin that woman. Was she justified in doing so? Claire had always held herself aloof from the backbiting and scandal which is an inevitable part of village life. She hated to feel that she now resembled one of those human ghouls she had always professed to despise. Suddenly, the vicar's words that morning flashed across her mind. Even to those people their hour comes. Was this her hour? Was this her temptation? Had it come insidiously disguised as a duty? She was Claire Halliwell, a Christian, in love and charity with all men and women. If she were to tell Gerald, she must be quite sure that only impersonal motives guided her. For the present, she would say nothing. She paid her bill for luncheon and drove away, feeling an indescribable lightening of spirit. Indeed, she felt happier than she had done for a long time. She felt glad that she had had the strength to resist temptation, to do nothing mean or unworthy. Just for a second it flashed across her mind that it might be a sense of power that had so lightened her spirits, but she dismissed the idea as fantastic. By Tuesday night, she was strengthened in her resolve. The revelation could not come through her. She must keep silence. Her own secret love for Gerald made speech impossible, rather a high-minded view to take. Perhaps, but it was the only one possible for her. She arrived at the Grange in her own little car. Sir Gerald's chauffeur was at the front door to drive it round to the garage after she had alighted. As the night was a wet one, he had just driven off when Claire remembered some books which she had borrowed and had brought with her to return. She called out, but the man did not hear her. The butler ran out after the car. So, for a minute or two, Claire was alone in the hall, close to the door of the drawing room which the butler had just unlatched prior to announcing her. Those inside the room, however, knew nothing of her arrival. And so it was that Vivian's voice, high-pitched, not quite the voice of a lady, rang out clearly and distinctly. "Oh, we're only waiting for Claire Halliwell. You must know her, lives in the village, supposed to be one of the local belles, but frightfully unattractive, really. She tried her best to catch Gerald, but he wasn't having any. Oh, yes, darling." This in answer to a murmured protest from her husband. She did, you mayn't be aware of the fact, but she did her very utmost. Poor old Claire. A good sort, but such a dump. Claire's face went dead white, her hands, hanging against her sides, clenched themselves in anger such as she had never known before. At that moment, she could have murdered Vivian Lee. It was only by a supreme physical effort that she regained control of herself. That, and the half-formed thought that she held it in her power to punish Vivian for those cruel words. The butler had returned with the books. He opened the door, announced her, and in another moment she was greeting a room full of people in her usual pleasant manner. Vivian, exquisitely dressed in some dark wine color that showed off her white fragility, was particularly affectionate and gushing. They didn't see half enough of Claire. She, Vivian, was going to learn golf, and Claire must come out with her on the links. Gerald was very attentive and kind, though he had no suspicion that she had overheard his wife's words. He had some vague idea of making up for them. He was very fond of Claire, and he wished Vivian wouldn't say the things she did. He and Claire had been friends, nothing more. And if there was an uneasy suspicion at the back of his mind that he was shirking the truth in that last statement, he put it away from him. After dinner, the talk fell on dogs, and Claire recounted Rover's accident. She purposely waited for a lull in the conversation to say, "So, on Saturday, I took him to Skippington." She heard the sudden rattle of Vivian Lee's coffee cup on the saucer, but she did not look at her yet. To see that man, Reeves, yes, he'll be all right, I think. I had lunch at the County Arms afterwards. Rather a decent little pub. She turned now to Vivian. Have you ever stayed there? If she had had any doubts, they were swept aside. Vivian's answer came quick in stammering haste. Oh, no. Fear was in her eyes. They were wide and dark with it, as they met Claire's. Claire's eyes told nothing. They were calm, scrutinizing. No one could have dreamt of the keen pleasure that they veiled. At that moment, Claire almost forgave Vivian for the words she had overheard earlier in the evening. She tasted in that moment a fullness of power that almost made her head reel. She held Vivian Lee in the hollow of her hand the following day. She received a note from the other woman. Would Claire come up and have tea with her quietly that afternoon? Claire refused. Then Vivian called on her. Twice she came at hours when Claire was almost certain to be at home. On the first occasion, Claire really was out. On the second, she slipped out by the back way when she saw Vivian coming up the path. She's not sure yet whether I know or not, she said to herself. She wants to find out without committing herself. But she shan't. Not until I'm ready. Claire hardly knew herself what she was waiting for. She had decided to keep silence. That was the only straight and honorable course. She felt an additional glow of virtue when she remembered the extreme provocation she had received. After overhearing the way Vivian talked of her behind her back, a weaker character, she felt, might have abandoned her good resolutions. She went twice to church on Sunday. First to early communion, from which she came out strengthened and uplifted. No personal feelings should weigh with her, nothing mean or petty. She went again to morning service. Mr. Wilmot preached on the famous prayer of the Pharisee. He sketched the life of that man, a good man, pillar of the church, and he pictured the slow, creeping blight of spiritual pride that distorted and soiled all that he was. Claire did not listen very attentively. Vivian was in the big square pew of the Lee family, and Claire knew by instinct that the other intended to get hold of her afterwards, so it fell out. Vivian attached herself to Claire, walked home with her, and asked if she might come in. Claire, of course, assented. They sat in Claire's little sitting room, bright with flowers and old-fashioned chintzes. Vivian's talk was desultory and jerky. I was at Bournemouth, last weekend, she remarked presently. Gerald told me so, said Claire. They looked at each other. Vivian appeared almost plain today. Her face had a sharp, foxy look that robbed it of much of its charm. When you were at Skippington? Began Vivian. When I was at Skippington? Echoed Claire politely. You were speaking about some little hotel there. The County Arms, yes. You didn't know it. You said, I have been there once. Oh, She had only to keep still and wait. Vivian was quite unfitted to bear a strain of any kind. Already she was breaking down under it. Suddenly, she leant forward and spoke vehemently. "You don't like me. You never have. You've always hated me. You're enjoying yourself now, playing with me like a cat with a mouse. You're cruel, cruel. That's why I'm afraid of you, because deep down you're cruel." "Really, Vivian," said Claire sharply. "You know, don't you?" "Yes, I can see that you know. You knew that night when you spoke about Skippington. You found out somehow. Well, I want to know what you're going to do about it. What are you going to do?" Claire did not reply for a minute, and Vivian sprang to her feet. "What are you going to do? I must know. You're not going to deny that you know all about it." "I do not propose to deny anything," said Claire coldly. "You saw me there that day." "No, I saw your handwriting in the book, Mir and Mrs. Cyril Brown." Vivian flushed darkly. "Since then," continued Claire quietly, "I have made inquiries. I find that you were not at Bournemouth that weekend. Your mother never sent for you. Exactly the same thing happened about 6 weeks previously." Vivian sank down again on the sofa. She burst into furious crying, the crying of a frightened child. "What are you going to do?" she gasped. "Are you going to tell Gerald?" "I don't know yet," said Claire. She felt calm, omnipotent. Vivian sat up, pushing the red curls back from her forehead. "Would you like to hear all about it?" "It would be as well. I think—" Vivian poured out the whole story. There was no reticence in her. Cyril Brown was Cyril Haviland, a young engineer to whom she had previously been engaged. His health failed, and he lost his job, whereupon he made no bones about jilting the penniless Vivian and marrying a rich widow many years older than himself. Soon afterwards, Vivian married Gerald Lee. She had met Cyril again by chance. That was the first of many meetings. Cyril, backed by his wife's money, was prospering in his career and becoming a well-known figure. It was a sordid story, a story of backstairs meeting, of ceaseless lying and intrigue. "I love him so," Vivian repeated again and again with a sudden moan, and each time the words made Claire feel physically sick. At last the stammering recital came to an end. Vivian muttered a shamefaced, "Well, what am I going to do?" asked Claire. "I can't tell you. I must have time to think." "You won't give me away to Gerald. It may be my duty to do so." "No, no." Vivian's voice rose to a hysterical shriek. "He'll divorce me. He won't listen to a word. He'll find out from that hotel, and Cyril will be dragged into it. And then his wife will divorce him. Everything will go with his career. His health, he'll be penniless again. He'd never forgive me, never." "Muss, if you'll excuse my saying so," said Claire. "I don't think much of this Cyril of yours." Vivian paid no attention. "I tell you, he'll hate me, hate me. I can't bear it. Don't tell Gerald. I'll do anything you like, but don't tell Gerald. I must have time to decide," said Claire gravely. "I can't promise anything offhand. In the meantime, you and Cyril mustn't meet again." "No, no, we won't. I swear it." "When I know what's the right thing to do," said Claire, "I'll let you know." She got up. Vivian went out of the house in a furtive, slinking way, glancing back over her shoulder. Claire wrinkled her nose in disgust. A beastly affair. Would Vivian keep her promise not to see Cyril? Probably not. She was weak rotten all through. That afternoon, Claire went for a long walk. There was a path which led along the downs. On the left, the green hills sloped gently down to the sea far below, while the path wound steadily upward. This walk was known locally as the Edge. Though safe enough, if you kept to the path, it was dangerous to wander from it. Those insidious gentle slopes were dangerous. Claire had lost a dog there once. The animal had gone racing over the smooth grass, gaining momentum, had been unable to stop, and had gone over the edge of the cliff to be dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks below. The afternoon was clear and beautiful. From far below, there came the ripple of the sea, a soothing murmur. Claire sat down on the short green turf and stared out over the blue water. She must face this thing clearly. What did she mean to do? She thought of Vivian with a kind of disgust. How the girl had crumpled up. How abjectly she had surrendered. Claire felt a rising contempt. She had no pluck, no grit. Nevertheless, much as she disliked Vivian, Claire decided that she would continue to spare her for the present. When she got home, she wrote a note to her, saying that although she could make no definite promise for the future, she had decided to keep silence for the present. Life went on much the same in Damer's End. It was noticed locally that Lady Lee was looking far from well. On the other hand, Claire Halliwell bloomed. Her eyes were brighter. She carried her head higher, and there was a new confidence and assurance in her manner. She and Lady Lee often met, and it was noticed on these occasions that the younger woman watched the older with a flattering attention to her slightest word. Sometimes Miss Halliwell would make remarks that seemed a little ambiguous, not entirely relevant to the matter in hand. She would suddenly say that she had changed her mind about many things lately, that it was curious how a little thing might alter one's point of view entirely. One was apt to give way too much to pity, and that was really quite wrong. When she said things of that kind, she usually looked at Lady Lee in a peculiar way, and the latter would suddenly grow quite white and look almost terrified. But as the year drew on, these little subtleties became less apparent. Claire continued to make the same remarks, but Lady Lee seemed less affected by them. She began to recover her looks and spirits. Her old gay manner returned. One morning, when she was taking her dog for a walk, Claire met Gerald in a lane. The latter's spaniel fraternized with Rover, while his master talked to Claire. "Heard our news," he said buoyantly. "I expect Vivian's told you." "What sort of news? Vivian hasn't mentioned anything in particular. We're going abroad for a year, perhaps longer. Vivian's fed up with this place, She never has cared for it. You know," he sighed. For a moment or two he looked downcast. Gerald Lee was very proud of his home. "Anyway, I've promised her a change. I've taken a villa near Algiers, a wonderful place, by all accounts." He laughed a little self-consciously. Quite a second honeymoon, eh? For a minute or two, Claire could not speak. Something seemed rising up in her throat and suffocating her. She could see the white walls of the villa, the orange trees, smell the soft perfumed breath of the south. A second honeymoon. They were going to escape. Vivian no longer believed in her threats. She was going away, carefree, gay, happy. Claire heard her own voice. a little hoarse in timbre, saying the appropriate things. How lovely! She envied them. Mercifully, at that moment, Rover and the spaniel decided to disagree. In the scuffle that ensued, further conversation was out of the question. That afternoon, Claire sat down and wrote a note to Vivian. She asked her to meet her on the edge the following day, as she had something very important to say to her. The next morning dawned bright and cloudless. Claire walked up the steep path of the edge with a lightened heart. What a perfect day! She was glad that she had decided to say what had to be said out in the open, under the blue sky, instead of in her stuffy little sitting room. She was sorry for Vivian. Very sorry indeed, but the thing had got to be done. She saw a yellow dot, like some yellow flower higher up by the side of the path. As she came nearer, it resolved itself into the figure of Vivian, dressed in a yellow knitted frock, sitting on the short turf, her hands clasped round her knees. "Good morning," said Claire. "Isn't it a perfect morning?" "Is it?" said Vivian. "I haven't noticed. What was it you wanted to say to me?" Claire dropped down on the grass beside her. "I'm quite out of breath," she said apologetically. "It's a steep pull up here." "Damn you!" cried Vivian shrilly. "Why can't you say it? You smooth-faced devil, instead of torturing me." Claire looked shocked, and Vivian hastily recanted. "I didn't mean that. I'm sorry." "Claire, I am indeed. Only my nerves are all to pieces, and you're sitting here and talking about the weather well. It got me all rattled." "You'll have a nervous breakdown if you're not careful," said Claire coldly. Vivian gave a short laugh. "Go over the edge." "No, I'm not that kind. I'll never be a loony. Now tell me, what's all this about?" Claire was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, looking not at Vivian, but steadily out over the sea. "I thought it only fair to warn you that I can no longer keep silence about what happened last year." "You mean you'll go to Gerald with the whole story?" "Unless you'll tell him yourself. That would be infinitely the better way." Vivian laughed sharply. "You know well enough I haven't got the pluck to do that." Claire did not contradict the assertion. She had had proof before of Vivian's utterly craven temper. "It would be infinitely better," she repeated. Again, Vivian gave that short, ugly laugh. "It's your precious conscience, I suppose, that drives you to do this," she sneered. "I dare say it seems very strange to you," said Claire quietly. "But it honestly is that—" Vivian's white, set face stared into hers. "My God," she said, "I really believe you mean it, too. You actually think that's the reason." "It is the reason?" "No, it isn't. If so, you'd have done it before long ago. Why didn't you know?" "Don't answer. I'll tell you. You got more pleasure out of holding it over me. That's why. You like to keep me on tenterhooks and make me wince and squirm. You'd say things, diabolical things, just to torment me and keep me perpetually on the jump. And so they did for a bit, till I got used to them." "You got to feel secure," said Claire. "You saw that, didn't you? But even then, you held back, enjoying your sense of power. But now, we're going away, escaping from you. Perhaps even going to be happy. You couldn't stick that at any price. So, your convenient conscience wakes up." She stopped, panting. Claire said, still very quietly, "I can't prevent your saying all these fantastical things, but I can assure you they're not true." Vivian turned suddenly and caught her by the hand. "Claire, for God's sake, I've been straight. I've done what you said. I've not seen Cyril again. I swear it. That's nothing to do with it. Claire, haven't you any pity, any kindness? I'll go down on my knees to you. Tell Gerald yourself. If you tell him, he may forgive you." Vivian laughed scornfully. "You know Gerald better than that. He'll be rabid, vindictive. He'll make me suffer. He'll make Cyril suffer. That's what I can't bear. Listen, Claire, he's doing so well. He's invented something machinery. I don't understand about it, but it may be a wonderful success. He's working it out now. His wife supplies the money for it, of course, but she's suspicious jealous. If she finds out, and she will find out if Gerald starts proceedings for divorce, she'll chuck Cyril his work. Everything. Cyril will be ruined." "I'm not thinking of Cyril," said Claire. "I'm thinking of Gerald. Why don't you think a little of him?" "Too, Gerald? I don't care that." She snapped her fingers. "For Gerald, I never have. We might as well have the truth now we're at it. But I do care for Cyril. I'm a rotter, through and through. I admit it. I dare say he's a rotter, too. But my feeling for him, that isn't rotten. I'd die for him. Do you hear? I'd die for him." "That is easily said," said Claire derisively. "You think I'm not in earnest? Listen, if you go on with this beastly business, I'll kill myself, sooner than have Cyril brought into it and ruined. I'd do that." Claire remained unimpressed. "You don't believe me," said Vivian, panting. "Suicide needs a lot of courage." Vivian flinched back as though she had been struck. "You've got me there." "Yes, I've no pluck. If there were an easy way—" "There's an easy way in front of you," said Claire. "You've only got to run straight down that green slope. It would be all over in a couple of minutes. Remember that child last year?" "Yes," said Vivian thoughtfully. "That would be easy, quite easy, if one really wanted to." Claire laughed. Vivian turned to her. "Let's have this out once more. Can't you see that by keeping silence as long as you have? You've no right to go back on it now. I'll not see Cyril again. I'll be a good wife to Gerald. I swear I will. Or I'll go away and never see him again. Whichever you like." Claire got up. "I advise you," she said, "to tell your husband yourself. Otherwise, I shall—" "I see," said Vivian softly. "Well, I can't let Cyril suffer." She got right up, stood still as though considering for a minute or two, then ran lightly down to the path, but instead of stopping, crossed it and went down the slope. Once she half turned her head and waved a hand gaily to Claire. Then she ran on gaily, lightly, as a child might run, out of sight. Claire stood petrified. Suddenly she heard cries, shouts, a clamor of voices. Then silence. She picked her way stiffly down to the path. About 100 yards away, a party of people coming up it had stopped. They were staring and pointing. Claire ran down and joined them. "Yes, miss, someone's fallen over the cliff. 2 men have gone down to see." She waited. Was it an hour, or eternity, or only a few minutes? A man came toiling up the ascent. It was the vicar in his shirt sleeves. His coat had been taken off to cover what lay below. "Horrible," he said. His face was very white. Mercifully, death must have been instantaneous. He saw Claire and came over to her. This must have been a terrible shock to you. You were taking a walk together. I understand. Claire heard herself answering mechanically. Yes, they had just parted. No, Lady Lee's manner had been quite normal. One of the group interposed the information that the lady was laughing and waving her hand. A terribly dangerous place. There ought to be a railing along the path. The vicar's voice rose again. An accident. Yes, clearly an accident. And then suddenly, Claire laughed. A hoarse, raucous laugh that echoed along the cliff. That's a damned lie, she said. I killed her. She felt someone patting her shoulder. A voice spoke soothingly. There, it's all right. You'll be all right presently. But Claire was not all right presently. She was never all right again. She persisted in the delusion. Certainly a delusion, since at least 8 persons had witnessed the scene that she had killed Vivian Lee. She was very miserable, till Nurse Lauriston came to take charge. Nurse Lauriston was very successful with mental cases. Humor them, poor things, she would say comfortably. So she told Claire that she was a wardress from Pentonville Prison. Claire's sentence, she said, had been commuted to penal servitude for life. A room was fitted up as a cell. And now, I think, we shall be quite happy and comfortable, said Nurse Lauriston to the doctor. Round-bladed knives, if you like. Doctor, but I don't think there's the least fear of suicide. She's not the type. Too self-centered. Funny how those are often the ones who go over the edge most easily. Chapter 4. The big logs crackled merrily in the wide, open fireplace, and above their crackling rose the babble of 6 tongues, all wagging industriously together. The house party of young people were enjoying their Christmas. Old Miss Endicott, known to most of those present as Aunt Emily, smiled indulgently on the clatter. Bet you can't eat 6 mince pies? Jean? Yes, I can. No, you can't. You'll get the pig out of the trifle if you do. Yes, and 3 helps of trifle, and 2 helps of plum pudding. I hope the pudding will be good, said Miss Endicott apprehensively, but they were only made 3 days ago. Christmas puddings ought to be made a long time before Christmas. Why, I remember when I was a child. I thought the last collect before Advent. Stir up, O Lord, we beseech thee, referred in some way to stirring up the Christmas puddings. There was a polite pause while Miss Endicott was speaking, not because any of the young people were in the least interested in her reminiscences of bygone days, but because they felt that some show of attention was due by good manners to their hostess. As soon as she stopped, the babble burst out again. Miss Endicott sighed and glanced towards the only member of the party whose years approached her own, as though in search of sympathy, a little man with a curious egg-shaped head and fierce, upstanding mustaches. Young people were not what they were, reflected Miss Endicott. In olden days, there would have been a mute, respectful circle, listening to the pearls of wisdom dropped by their elders. Instead of which, there was all this nonsensical chatter, most of it utterly incomprehensible. All the same, they were dear children. Her eyes softened as she passed them in review. Tall, freckled Jean, little Nancy Cardell, with her dark gypsy beauty, the 2 younger boys home from school, Johnny and Eric, and their friend, Charlie Pease, and fair, beautiful Evelyn Hayworth. At thought of the last, her brow contracted a little. and her eyes wandered to where her eldest nephew, Roger, sat morosely silent, taking no part in the fun, with his eyes fixed on the exquisite northern fairness of the young girl. "Isn't the snow ripping?" cried Johnny, approaching the window. "Real Christmas weather. I say, let's have a snowball fight. There's lots of time before dinner, isn't there? Aunt Emily?" "Yes, my dear. We have it at 2 o'clock. That reminds me. I had better see to the table." She hurried out of the room. "I tell you what, we'll make a snowman," screamed Jean. "Yes, what fun I know. We'll do a snow statue of Poirot. Do you hear? Poirot. The great detective, Hercule Poirot, modeled in snow, by 6 celebrated artists." The little man in the chair bowed his acknowledgments with a twinkling eye. "Make him very handsome, my children," he urged. "I insist on that. Rather." The troupe disappeared like a whirlwind, colliding in the doorway with a stately butler who was entering with a note on a salver. The butler, his calm re-established, advanced towards Poirot. Poirot took the note and tore it open. The butler departed. Twice the little man read the note through. Then he folded it up and put it in his pocket. Not a muscle of his face had moved, and yet the contents of the note were sufficiently surprising. Scrawled in an illiterate hand were the words, "Don't eat any plum pudding." "Very interesting," murmured Mem Poirot to himself, "and quite unexpected." He looked across to the fireplace. Evelyn Hayworth had not gone out with the rest. She was sitting staring at the fire, absorbed in thought, nervously twisting a ring on the 3rd finger of her left hand round and round. "You are lost in a dream, mademoiselle," said the little man at last. "And the dream is not a happy one, eh?" She started and looked across at him uncertainly. He nodded reassuringly. "It is my business to know things." "No, you are not happy. Me, too. I am not very happy. Shall we confide in each other? See you. I have the big sorrow, because a friend of mine, a friend of many years, has gone away across the sea to the South America. Sometimes, when we were together, this friend made me impatient. His stupidity enraged me, but now that he is gone, I can remember only his good qualities. That is the way of life, is it not? And now, mademoiselle, what is your trouble? You are not like me, old and alone. You are young and beautiful, and the man you love loves you. Oh, yes, it is so. I have been watching him for the last half hour." The girl's color rose. "You mean Roger Endicott? Oh, but you have made a mistake. It is not Roger I am engaged to. No, you are engaged to Mr. Oscar Levering. I know that perfectly. But why are you engaged to him, since you love another man?" The girl did not seem to resent his words. Indeed, there was something in his manner which made that impossible. He spoke with a mixture of kindliness and authority that was irresistible. "Tell me all about it," said Poirot gently, and he added the phrase he had used before, the sound of which was oddly comforting to the girl. "It is my business to know things. I'm so miserable." Poirot, so very miserable. "You see, once we were very well off. I was supposed to be an heiress, and Roger was only a younger son, and And although I'm sure he cared for me, he never said anything, but went off to Australia. It is droll, the way they arrange the marriages over here. Interpolated Mim. Poirot? No order, no method. Everything left to chance. Evelyn continued. Then suddenly we lost all our money. My mother and I were left almost penniless. We moved into a tiny house, and we could just manage. But my mother became very ill. The only chance for her was to have a serious operation and go abroad to a warm climate. And we hadn't the money. M. Poirot. We hadn't the money. It meant that she must die. Mr. Levering had proposed to me once or twice already. He again asked me to marry him and promised to do everything that could be done for my mother. I said yes. What else could I do? He kept his word. The operation was performed by the greatest specialist of the day, and we went to Egypt for the winter. That was a year ago. My mother is well and strong again, and I am to marry Mr. Levering after Christmas. I see, said Monsieur Poirot, and in the meantime, Roger's elder brother has died, and he has come home to find his dream shattered. All the same, you are not yet married. Mademoiselle, a Haworth does not break her word. Poirot, said the girl proudly. Almost as she spoke, the door opened, and a big man with a rubicund face, narrow, crafty eyes, and a bald head stood on the threshold. What are you moping in here for? Evelyn, come out for a stroll. Very well, Oscar. She rose listlessly. Poirot rose also and demanded politely, Mademoiselle Levering, she is still indisposed. Yes, I'm sorry to say, my sister is still in bed. Too bad to be laid up on Christmas Day. It is indeed, agreed the detective politely. A few minutes sufficed for Evelyn to put on her snow boots and some wraps. And she and her fiancé went out into the snow-covered grounds. It was an ideal Christmas day, crisp and sunny. The rest of the house party were busy with the erection of the snowman. Levering and Evelyn paused to watch them. Love's young dream. Yeah, cried Johnny, and threw a snowball at them. What do you think of it? Evelyn, cried Jane. Hercule Poirot, the great detective. Wait till the mustache goes on, said Eric. Nancy's going to clip off a bit of her hair for it. Vivent les braves Belges, pomme, pomme. Fancy having a real live detective in the house. This from Charlie. I wish there could be a murder, too. Oh, 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 cried Jean, dancing about. I've got an idea. Let's get up a murder, a spoof one, and take him in. Oh, Dulet's it would be no end of a rag. 5 voices began to talk at once. How should we do it? Awful groans. No, you stupid. Out here. Footprints in the snow. Of course. Jean in her nightie. You do it with red paint. In your hand and clap it to your head. I say. I wish we had a revolver. I tell you, Father and Aunt Em won't hear. Their rooms are the other side of the house. No, he won't mind a bit. He's no end of a sport. Yes, but what kind of red paint enamel? We could get some in the village. Fathead. Not on Christmas Day. No. Watercolor. Crimson Lake. Jean can be it. Never mind if you're cold. It won't be for long. No. Nancy can be it. Nancy's got those posh pajamas. Let's see if Graves knows where there's any paint. A stampede to the house. In a brown study. Endicott, said Levering, laughing disagreeably. Roger roused himself abruptly. He had heard little of what had passed. "I was just wondering," he said quietly. Wondering. Wondering what Poirot was doing down here at all. Levering seemed taken aback, but at that moment, the big gong pealed out, and everybody went in to Christmas dinner. The curtains were drawn in the dining room, and the lights on, illuminating the long table piled high with crackers and other decorations. It was a real old-fashioned Christmas dinner. At one end of the table was the squire, red-faced and jovial. His sister faced him at the other. Poirot, in honor of the occasion, had donned a red waistcoat, and his plumpness, and the way he carried his head on one side, reminded one irresistibly of a robin redbreast. The squire carved rapidly, and everyone fell to on turkey. The carcasses of 2 turkeys were removed, and there fell a breathless hush. Then Graves, the butler, appeared in state, bearing the plum pudding aloft, a gigantic pudding wreathed in flames. A hullabaloo broke out. "Quick! Oh, my piece is going out! Buck up! Graves, unless it's still burning, I shan't get my wish." Nobody had leisure to notice a curious expression on the face of Maître Poirot as he surveyed the portion of pudding on his plate. Nobody observed the lightning glance he sent round the table. With a faint, puzzled frown, he began to eat his pudding. Everybody began to eat pudding. The conversation was more subdued. Suddenly the squire uttered an exclamation. His face became purple, and his hand went to his mouth. "Confound it! Emily!" he roared. "Why do you let the cook put glass in the puddings?" "Glass!" cried Miss Endicott, astonished. The squire withdrew the offending substance from his mouth. "Might have broken a tooth," he grumbled, "or swallowed it and had appendicitis." In front of each person was a small finger bowl of water, designed to receive the sixpences and other matters found in the trifle. Mr. Endicott dropped the piece of glass into this, rinsed it, and held it up. "God bless my soul," he ejaculated. "It's a red stone out of one of the cracker brooches. You permit," very deftly, Poirot took it from his fingers and examined it attentively. As the squire had said, it was a big red stone, the color of a ruby. The light gleamed from its facets as he turned it about. "Gee!" cried Eric. "Suppose it's real." "Silly boy," said Jean scornfully. "A ruby that size would be worth thousands and thousands and thousands, wouldn't it?" "Extraordinary how well they get up these cracker things," murmured Miss Endicott. "But how did it get into the pudding?" Undoubtedly that was the question of the hour. Every hypothesis was exhausted. Only Poirot said nothing, but carelessly, as though thinking of something else. He dropped the stone into his pocket. After dinner, he paid a visit to the kitchen. The cook was rather flustered. To be questioned by a member of the house party, and the foreign gentleman too. But she did her best to answer his questions. The puddings had been made 3 days ago. The day you arrived, sir. Everyone had come out into the kitchen to have a stir and wish. An old custom. Perhaps they didn't have it abroad. After that, the puddings were boiled, and then they were put in a row on the top shelf in the larder. Was there anything special to distinguish this pudding from the others? No. She didn't think so, except that it was in an aluminium pudding basin, and the others were in china ones. Was it the pudding originally intended for Christmas Day? It was funny that he should ask that. No. Indeed, the Christmas pudding was always boiled in a big white china mold with a pattern of holly leaves. But this very morning, the cook's red face became wrathful Gladys. The kitchen maid, sent to fetch it down for the final boiling, had managed to drop and break it. And of course, seeing that there might be splinters in it, I wouldn't send it to table, but took the big aluminium one instead. M. Poirot thanked her for her information. He went out of the kitchen, smiling a little to himself, as though satisfied with the information he had obtained, and the fingers of his right hand played with something in his pocket. Poirot. Poirot, do wake up. Something dreadful's happened. Thus Johnny, in the early hours of the following morning. Poirot sat up in bed. He wore a nightcap. The contrast between the dignity of his countenance and the rakish tilt of the nightcap was certainly droll, but its effect on Johnny seemed disproportionate. But for his words, one might have fancied that the boy was violently amused about something. Curious sounds came from outside the door, too, suggesting soda-water siphons in difficulty. "Come down at once, please," continued Johnny, his voice shaking slightly. "Someone's been killed." He turned away. "Aha, that is serious," said Poirot. He arose, and, without unduly hurrying himself, made a partial toilet. Then he followed Johnny down the stairs. The house party was clustered round the door into the garden. Their countenances all expressed intense emotion. At sight of him, Eric was seized with a violent choking fit. Jean came forward and laid her hand on Monsieur Poirot's arm. "Look," she said, and pointed dramatically through the open door. "Mon Dieu!" ejaculated Monsieur Poirot. "It is like a scene on the stage." His remark was not an apposite. More snow had fallen during the night. The world looked white and ghostly in the faint light of the early dawn. The expanse of white lay unbroken, save for what looked like, on splash, of vivid scarlet. Nancy Cardell lay motionless on the snow. She was clad in scarlet silk pajamas. Her small feet were bare. Her arms were spread wide. Her head was turned aside and hidden by the mass of her clustering black hair. Deadly still she lay, and from her left side rose up the hilt of a dagger, whilst on the snow there was an ever-widening patch of crimson. Poirot went out into the snow. He did not go to where the girl's body lay, but kept to the path. 2 tracks of footmarks, a man's and a woman's, led to where the tragedy had occurred. The man's footprints went away in the opposite direction alone. Poirot stood on the path, stroking his chin reflectively. Suddenly, Oscar Levering burst out of the house. "Good God!" he cried. "What's this?" His excitement was a contrast to the other's calm. "It looks," said Poirot thoughtfully, "like murder." Eric had another violent attack of coughing. "But we must do something," cried the other. "What shall we do?" "There is only one thing to be done," said Poirot. "Send for the police." "Oh," said everybody at once. Poirot looked inquiringly at them. "Certainly," he said. "It is the only thing to be done. Who will go?" There was a pause. Then Johnny came forward. "Rag's over," he declared. "I say, Poirot, I hope you won't be too mad with us. It's all a joke. You know, got up between us just to pull your leg. Nancy's only shamming." Poirot regarded him without visible emotion, save that his eyes twinkled a moment. "You mock yourselves at me. Is that it?" he inquired placidly. I say, I'm awfully sorry, really. We shouldn't have done it. Beastly bad taste. I apologize. I really do. You need not apologize, said the other in a peculiar voice. Johnny turned. I say, Nancy, get up, he cried. Don't lie there all day. But the figure on the ground did not move. Get up, cried Johnny again. Still, Nancy did not move. And suddenly, a feeling of nameless dread came over the boy. He turned to Poirot. What's the matter? Why doesn't she get up? Come with me, said Poirot curtly. He strode over the snow. He had waved the others back, and he was careful not to infringe on the other footmarks. The boy followed him, frightened and unbelieving. Poirot knelt down by the girl. Then he signed to Johnny. Feel her hand and pulse. Wondering, the boy bent down, then started back with a cry. The hand and arm were stiff and cold, and no vestige of a pulse was to be found. Geschockt, Stet, he gasped. But how, why, Poirot passed over the first part of the question. Why, he said musingly, I wonder. Then, suddenly leaning across the dead girl's body, he unclasped her other hand, which was tightly clenched over something. Both he and the boy uttered an exclamation. In the palm of Nancy's hand was a red stone that winked and flashed forth fire. Ah, cried Mem. Poirot. Swift as a flash, his hand flew to his pocket and came away empty. The cracker ruby, said Johnny wonderingly. Then, as his companion bent to examine the dagger and the stained snow, he cried out, Surely it can't be blood. Poirot, it's paint. It's only paint. Poirot straightened himself. Yes, he said quietly. You are right. It's only paint. Then how? The boy broke off. Poirot finished the sentence for him. How was she killed that we must find out? Did she eat or drink anything this morning? He was retracing his steps to the path where the others waited as he spoke. Johnny was close behind him. She had a cup of tea, said the boy. Mr. Levering made it for her. He's got a spirit lamp in his room. Johnny's voice was loud and clear. Levering heard the words. Always take a spirit lamp about with me, he declared. Most handy thing in the world. My sister's been glad enough of it this visit, not liking to worry the servants all the time, you know. Poirot's eyes fell, almost apologetically, as it seemed, to Mr. Levering's feet, which were encased in carpet slippers. You have changed your boots. I see, he murmured gently. Levering stared at him. But, Poirot, cried Jean, what are we to do? There is only one thing to be done. As I said just now, Mademoiselle, send for the police. I'll go, cried Levering. It won't take me a minute to put on my boots. You people had better not stay out here in the cold. He disappeared into the house. He is so thoughtful. That Mr. Levering, murmured Poirot softly. Shall we take his advice? What about waking father and everybody? No, said Poirot sharply. It is quite unnecessary until the police come. Nothing must be touched out here. So shall we go inside to the library? I have a little history to recount to you, which may distract your minds from this sad tragedy. He led the way, and they followed him. The story is about a ruby, said Poirot, ensconcing himself in a comfortable armchair. A very celebrated ruby which belonged to a very celebrated man. I will not tell you his name, but he is one of the great ones of the earth. Eh bien, this great man, he arrived in London, incognito, and since, though a great man, he was also a young and a foolish man, he became entangled with a pretty young lady. The pretty young lady. She did not care much for the man, but she did care for his possessions, so much so that she disappeared one day with the historic ruby which had belonged to his house for generations. The poor young man, he was in a quandary. He is shortly to be married to a noble princess, and he does not want the scandal. Impossible to go to the police. He comes to me, Hercule Poirot, instead. Recover for me my ruby. He says, Eh bien, I know something of this young lady. She has a brother, and between them they have put through many a clever coup. I happen to know where they are staying for Christmas. By the kindness of Mr. Endicott, whom I chance to have met, I, too, become a guest. But when this pretty young lady hears that I am arriving, she is greatly alarmed. She is intelligent, and she knows that I am after the ruby. She must hide it immediately in a safe place. And figure to yourself where she hides it, in a plum pudding. Yes, you may well say, "Oh, she is stirring with the rest, you see," and she pops it into a pudding bowl of aluminium that is different from the others. By a strange chance, that pudding came to be used on Christmas Day. The tragedy forgotten for the moment, they stared at him open-mouthed. After that, continued the little man, she took to her bed. He drew out his watch and looked at it. The household is astir. Mr. Levering is a long time fetching the police. Is he not? I fancy that his sister went with him. Evelyn rose with a cry, her eyes fixed on Poirot, and I also fancy that they will not return. Oscar Levering has been sailing close to the wind for a long time, and this is the end. He and his sister will pursue their activities abroad for a time under a different name. I alternately tempted and frightened him this morning. By casting aside all pretense, he could gain possession of the ruby whilst we were in the house and he was supposed to be fetching the police. But it meant burning his boats. Still, with a case being built up against him for murder, flight seemed clearly indicated. Did he kill Nancy? Whispered Jean. Poirot rose. Supposing we visit once more the scene of the crime, he suggested. He led the way, and they followed him. But a simultaneous gasp broke from their lips as they passed outside the house. No trace of the tragedy remained. The snow was smooth and unbroken. Crikey, said Eric, sinking down on the step. It wasn't all a dream, was it? Most extraordinary, said Monsieur Poirot. The mystery of the disappearing body. His eyes twinkled gently. Jean came up to him in sudden suspicion. Poirot. You aren't, I say. You haven't been spoofing us all the time, have you? Oh, I do believe you have. It is true. My children, I knew about your little plot, you see, and I arranged a little counterplot of my own. Ah, here is Manuel, Nancy, and none the worse, I hope, after her magnificent acting of the comedy. It was indeed Nancy Cardell in the flesh, her eyes shining, and her whole person exuberant with health and vigor. You have not caught cold! You drank the tisane I sent to your room, demanded Poirot accusingly. I took one sip, and that was enough. I'm all right. Did I do it well? Poirot. Oh, My arm hurts after that tourniquet. You were splendid, petite. But shall we explain to the others? They are still in the fog, I perceive. See you. Mes enfants. I went to Mademoiselle Nancy, told her that I knew all about your little complot, and asked her if she would act a part for me. She did it very cleverly. She induced Mr. Levering to make her a cup of tea, and also managed that he should be the one chosen to leave footprints on the snow. So when the time came, and he thought that by some fatality she was really dead, I had all the materials to frighten him with. What happened after we went into the house? Mademoiselle, he came down with his sister, snatched the ruby out of my hand, and off they went post-haste. But I say, Poirot, what about the ruby? Cried Eric. Do you mean to say you've let them have that? Poirot's face fell as he faced a circle of accusing eyes. I shall recover it yet, he said feebly, but he perceived that he had gone down in their estimation. Well, I do think, began Johnny, to let them get away with the ruby. But Jean was sharper. He's spoofing us again, she cried. You are, aren't you? Feel in my left-hand pocket, Mademoiselle. Jean thrust in an eager hand and drew it out again with a squeal of triumph. She held aloft the great ruby in its crimson splendor. You see, explained Poirot, the other was a paste replica I brought with me from London. Isn't he clever? Demanded Jean ecstatically. There's one thing you haven't told us, said Johnny suddenly. How did you know about the rag? Did Nancy tell you? Poirot shook his head. Then how did you know? It is my business to know things, said Poirot, smiling a little as he watched Evelyn Haworth and Roger Endicott walking down the path together. Yes, but do tell us. Oh, do, please. Dear Poirot, please tell us. He was surrounded by a circle of flushed, eager faces. You really wish that I should solve for you this mystery? Yes, I do not think I can. Why not? Ma foi, you will be so disappointed. Oh, do tell us. How'd you know? Well, you see, I was in the library. Yes, and you were discussing your plans just outside, and the library window was open. Is that all? Said Eric in disgust. How simple. Is it not? Said Poirot, smiling. At all events, we know everything now, said Jean in a satisfied voice. Do we? Muttered Poirot to himself. As he went into the house, whose business it is to know things. And, for perhaps the 20th time, he drew from his pocket a rather dirty piece of paper. Don't eat any plum pudding. Poirot shook his head perplexedly. At the same moment, he became aware of a peculiar gasping sound very near his feet. He looked down and perceived a small creature in a print dress. In her left hand was a dustpan, and in the right a brush. And who may you be? Mon enfant, inquired Poirot. Annie X, please, sir. Between maid. Poirot had an inspiration. He handed her the letter. Did you write that, Annie? I didn't mean any harm, sir. He smiled at her. Of course you didn't. Suppose you tell me all about it. It was them two. Sir, Mr. Levering and his sister. None of us can abide 'em, and she wasn't ill a bit. We could all tell that. So I thought something queer was going on. And I'll tell you straight, sir, I listened at the door, and I heard him say as plain, This fellow Poirot must be got out of the way as soon as possible. And then he says to her, meaning like, "Where did you put it?" And she answers, "In the pudding. And so I saw they meant to poison you in the Christmas pudding. And I didn't know what to do. Cook wouldn't listen to the likes of me. And then I thought of writing a warning, and I put it in the awl where Mr. Graves would be sure to see it and take it to you." Annie paused breathless. Poirot surveyed her gravely for some minutes. "You read too many novelettes, Annie," he said at last, "but you have the good heart, and a certain amount of intelligence. When I return to London, I will send you an excellent book upon Le Ménage, also the Lives of the Saints, and a work upon the economic position of woman." Leaving Annie gasping anew, he turned and crossed the hall. He had meant to go into the library, but through the open door he saw a dark head and a fair one, very close together. And he paused where he stood. Suddenly, a pair of arms slipped round his neck. "If you will stand just under the mistletoe," said John. "Me too," said Nancy. Poirot enjoyed it all. He enjoyed it very much indeed. Chapter 5. He stood on a shelf in the British Museum, alone and forlorn amongst a company of obviously more important deities. Ranged round the four walls, these greater personages all seemed to display an overwhelming sense of their own superiority. The pedestal of each was duly inscribed with the land and race that had been proud to possess him. There was no doubt of their position. They were divinities of importance and recognized as such. Only the little god in the corner was aloof and remote from their company. Roughly hewn out of gray stone, his features almost totally obliterated by time and exposure, he sat there in isolation, his elbows on his knees, and his head buried in his hands, a lonely little god in a strange country. There was no inscription to tell the land whence he came. He was indeed lost, without honor or renown, a pathetic little figure very far from home. No one noticed him. No one stopped to look at him. Why should they? He was so insignificant. A block of gray stone in a corner. On either side of him were two Mexican gods worn smooth with age, placid idols with folded hands, and cruel mouths curved in a smile that showed openly their contempt of humanity. There was also a rotund, violently self-assertive little god, with a clenched fist, who evidently suffered from a swollen sense of his own importance, but passers-by stopped to give him a glance sometimes, even if it was only to laugh at the contrast of his absurd pomposity with the smiling indifference of his Mexican companions. And the little lost god sat on there hopelessly, his head in his hands, as he had sat year in and year out, till one day the impossible happened, and he found a worshiper. "Any letters for me?" The hall porter removed a packet of letters from a pigeonhole, gave a cursory glance through them, and said in a wooden voice, "Nothing for you, sir?" Frank Oliver sighed as he walked out of the club again. There was no particular reason why there should have been anything for him. Very few people wrote to him ever since he had returned from Burma in the spring. He had become conscious of a growing and increasing loneliness. Frank Oliver was a man just over 40, and the last 18 years of his life had been spent in various parts of the globe, with brief furloughs in England. Now that he had retired and come home to live for good, he realized for the first time how very much alone in the world he was. True, there was his sister Greta, married to a Yorkshire clergyman, very busy with parochial duties and the bringing up of a family of small children. Greta was naturally very fond of her only brother, but equally naturally, she had very little time to give him. Then there was his old friend, Tom Hurley. Tom was married to a nice, bright, cheerful girl, very energetic and practical, of whom Frank was secretly afraid. She told him brightly that he must not be a crabbed old bachelor, and was always producing nice girls. Frank Oliver found that he never had anything to say to these nice girls. They persevered with him for a while, then gave him up as hopeless. And yet he was not really unsociable. He had a great longing for companionship and sympathy, and ever since he had been back in England, he had become aware of a growing discouragement. He had been away too long. He was out of tune with the times. He spent long, aimless days wandering about, wondering what on earth he was to do with himself next. It was on one of these days that he strolled into the British Museum. He was interested in Asiatic curiosities, and so it was that he chanced upon the lonely god. Its charm held him at once. Here was something vaguely akin to himself. Here, too, was someone lost and astray in a strange land. He became in the habit of paying frequent visits to the museum, just to glance in on the little gray stone figure in its obscure place on the high shelf. Rough luck on the little chap, he thought to himself. Probably had a lot of fuss made about him once. Kowtowing and offerings and all the rest of it. He had begun to feel such a proprietary right in his little friend, it really almost amounted to a sense of actual ownership, that he was inclined to be resentful when he found that the little god had made a second conquest. He had discovered the lonely god, nobody else. He felt had a right to interfere. But after the first flash of indignation, he was forced to smile at himself. For this second worshipper was such a little bit of a thing, such a ridiculous, pathetic creature, in a shabby black coat and skirt that had seen its best days. She was young, a little over 20, he should judge, with fair hair and blue eyes, and a wistful droop to her mouth. Her hat especially appealed to his chivalry. She had evidently trimmed it herself, and it made such a brave attempt to be smart that its failure was pathetic. She was obviously a lady, though a poverty-stricken one, and he immediately decided in his own mind that she was a governess and alone in the world. He soon found out that her days for visiting the god were Tuesdays and Fridays, and she always arrived at 10 o'clock. As soon as the museum was open. At first he disliked her intrusion, but little by little it began to form one of the principal interests of his monotonous life. Indeed, the fellow devotee was fast ousting the object of devotion from his position of preeminence. The days that he did not see the little lonely lady, as he called her to himself, were blank. Perhaps she, too, was equally interested in him, though she endeavored to conceal the fact with studious unconcern. But little by little, a sense of fellowship was slowly growing between them, though as yet they had exchanged no spoken word. The truth of the matter was, the man was too shy. He argued to himself that very likely she had not even noticed him. Some inner sense gave the lie to that instantly, that she would consider it a great impertinence, and, finally, that he had not the least idea what to say. But fate, or the little god, was kind and sent him an inspiration. or what he regarded as such. With infinite delight in his own cunning, he purchased a woman's handkerchief, a frail little affair of cambric and lace which he almost feared to touch. And, thus armed, he followed her as she departed and stopped her in the Egyptian room. "Excuse me, but is this yours?" He tried to speak with airy unconcern and signally failed. The lonely lady took it and made a pretense of examining it with minute care. "No, it is not mine." She handed it back and added, with what he felt guiltily was a suspicious glance, "It's quite a new one. The price is still on it." But he was unwilling to admit that he had been found out. He started on an overplausible flow of explanation. "You see, I picked it up under that big case. It was just by the farthest leg of it." He derived great relief from this detailed account. "So, as you had been standing there, I thought it must be yours, and came after you with it." She said again, "No, it isn't mine," and added, as if with a sense of ungraciousness, "Thank you." The conversation came to an awkward standstill. The girl stood there, pink and embarrassed, evidently uncertain how to retreat with dignity. He made a desperate effort to take advantage of his opportunity. I, I, I didn't know there was anyone else in London who cared for our little lonely god till you came," she answered eagerly. Forgetting her reserve, "Do you call him that too?" Apparently, if she had noticed his pronoun, she did not resent it. She had been startled into sympathy, and his quiet "of course" seemed the most natural rejoinder in the world. Again, there was a silence, but this time it was a silence born of understanding. It was the lonely lady who broke it in a sudden remembrance of the conventionalities. She drew herself up to her full height, and with an almost ridiculous assumption of dignity for so small a person, she observed in chilling accents, "I must be going now. Good morning," and with a slight, stiff inclination of her head, she walked away, holding herself very erect. By all acknowledged standards, Frank Oliver ought to have felt rebuffed. But it is a regrettable sign of his rapid advance in depravity that he merely murmured to himself, "Little darling." He was soon to repent of his temerity. However, for 10 days his little lady never came near the museum. He was in despair. He had frightened her away. She would never come back. He was a brute, a villain. He would never see her again. In his distress, he haunted the British Museum all day long. She might merely have changed her time of coming. He soon began to know the adjacent rooms by heart, and he contracted a lasting hatred of mummies. The guardian policeman observed him with suspicion when he spent 3 hours poring over Assyrian hieroglyphics, and the contemplation of endless vases of all ages nearly drove him mad with boredom. But one day his patience was rewarded. She came again, rather pinker than usual, and trying hard to appear self-possessed. He greeted her with cheerful friendliness. "Good morning. It is ages since you've been here." "Good morning." She let the words slip out with icy frigidity and coldly ignored the end part of his sentence. But he was desperate. "Look here." He stood confronting her with pleading eyes that reminded her irresistibly of a large, faithful dog. "Won't you be friends? I'm all alone in London, all alone in the world. And I believe you are, and too. We ought to be friends. Besides, our little god has introduced us." She looked up, half doubtfully. but there was a faint smile quivering at the corners of her mouth. Has he? Of course. It was the second time he had used this extremely positive form of assurance, and now, as before, it did not fail of its effect. For after a minute or two, the girl said, in that slightly royal manner of hers, "Very well." "That's splendid," he replied gruffly, but there was something in his voice as he said it that made the girl glance at him swiftly, with a sharp impulse of pity, and so the queer friendship began. Twice a week they met, at the shrine of a little heathen idol. At first, they confined their conversation solely to him. He was, as it were, at once a palliation of, and an excuse for, their friendship. The question of his origin was widely discussed. The man insisted on attributing to him the most bloodthirsty characteristics. He depicted him as the terror and dread of his native land, insatiable for human sacrifice, and bowed down to by his people in fear and trembling. In the contrast between his former greatness and his present insignificance, there lay, according to the man, all the pathos of the situation. The lonely lady would have none of this theory. He was essentially a kind little god. She insisted. She doubted whether he had ever been very powerful. If he had been so, she argued, he would not now be lost and friendless. And, anyway, he was a dear little god, and she loved him, and she hated to think of him sitting there, day after day, with all those other horrid, supercilious things jeering at him, because you could see they did. After this vehement outburst, the little lady was quite out of breath, that topic exhausted. They naturally began to talk of themselves. He found out that his surmise was correct. She was a nursery governess to a family of children who lived at Hampstead. He conceived an instant dislike of these children, of Ted, who was 5 and really not naughty, only mischievous, of the twins who were rather trying, and of Molly, who wouldn't do anything she was told, but was such a dear you couldn't be cross with her. "Those children bully you," he said grimly and accusingly to her. "They do not," she retorted with spirit. "I am extremely stern with them." "Oh, ye gods," he laughed. But she made him apologize humbly for his skepticism. She was an orphan, she told him, quite alone in the world. Gradually, he told her something of his own life, of his official life, which had been painstaking and mildly successful, and then of his unofficial pastime, which was the spoiling of yards of canvas. "Of course, I don't know anything about it," he explained, "but I have always felt I could paint something someday. I can sketch pretty decently, but I'd like to do a real picture of something. A chap who knew once told me that my technique wasn't bad." She was interested, pressed for details. "I am sure you paint awfully well." He shook his head. "No, I have begun several things lately, and chucked them up in despair. I always thought that, when I had the time, it would be plain sailing. I have been storing up that idea for years, but now, like everything else, I suppose, I've left it too late." "Nothing's too late ever," said the little lady, with the vehement earnestness of the very young. He smiled down on her. "You think not, child. It's too late for some things for me." And the little lady laughed at him and nicknamed him Methuselah. They were beginning to feel curiously at home in the British Museum. The solid and sympathetic policeman, who patrolled the galleries, was a man of tact, and on the appearance of the couple, he usually found that his onerous duties of guardianship were urgently needed in the adjoining Assyrian room. One day, the man took a bold step. He invited her out to tea. At first, she demurred. "I have no time. I am not free. I can come some mornings because the children have French lessons." "Nonsense," said the man. "You could manage one day, kill off an aunt, or a second cousin or something. But come, we'll go to a little ABC shop near here and have buns for tea. I know you must love buns." "Yes, the penny kind with currants, and a lovely glaze on top. They are such plump, dear things. There is something," Frank Oliver said solemnly, "infinitely comforting about a bun." So it was arranged, and the little governess came, wearing quite an expensive hothouse rose in her belt in honor of the occasion. He had noticed that, of late, she had a strained, worried look, and it was more apparent than ever this afternoon as she poured out the tea at the little marble-top table. "Children been bothering you?" he asked solicitously. She shook her head. She had seemed curiously disinclined to talk about the children lately. "They're all right. I never mind them. Don't you?" His sympathetic tone seemed to distress her unwarrantably. "Oh, no, it was never that. But indeed, I was lonely. I was indeed." Her tone was almost pleading. He said quickly, touched, "Yes, yes, child, I know, I know." After a minute's pause, he remarked in a cheerful tone, "Do you know? You haven't even asked my name yet." She held up a protesting hand. "Please, I don't want to know it. And don't ask mine. Let us be just two lonely people who've come together and made friends. It makes it so much more wonderful and indifferent." He said slowly and thoughtfully, "Very well. In an otherwise lonely world, we'll be two people who have just each other." It was a little different from her way of putting it, and she seemed to find it difficult to go on with the conversation. Instead, she bent lower and lower over her plate, till only the crown of her hat was visible. "That's rather a nice hat," he said, by way of restoring her equanimity. "I trimmed it myself," she informed him proudly. "I thought so the moment I saw it," he answered, saying the wrong thing with cheerful ignorance. "I'm afraid it is not as fashionable as I meant it to be." "I think it's a perfectly lovely hat," he said loyally. Again, constraint settled down upon them. Frank Oliver broke the silence bravely. "Little lady, I didn't mean to tell you yet, but I can't help it. I love you. I want you. I loved you from the first moment I saw you standing there in your little black suit. Dearest, if two lonely people were together, why, there would be no more loneliness. And I'd work. Oh, how I'd work. I'd paint you. I could. I know I could. Oh, my little girl. I can't live without you. I can't indeed." His little lady was looking at him very steadily. But what she said was quite the last thing he expected her to say. Very quietly and distinctly she said, "You bought that handkerchief." He was amazed at this proof of feminine perspicacity, and still more amazed at her remembering it against him now. Surely, after this lapse of time, it might have been forgiven him. "Yes, I did," he acknowledged humbly. "I wanted an excuse to speak to you. Are you very angry?" He waited meekly for her words of condemnation. "I think it was sweet of you cried the little lady with vehemence. Just sweet of you. Her voice ended uncertainly. Frank Oliver went on in his gruff tone. Tell me, child, is it impossible I know I'm an ugly, rough old fellow? The lonely lady interrupted him. No, you're not. I wouldn't have you different. Not in any way. I love you just as you are. Do you understand? Not because I'm sorry for you. Not because I'm alone in the world and want someone to be fond of me and take care of me, but because you're just you. Now, do you understand? Is it true? He asked, half in a whisper. And she answered steadily, Yes, it's true. The wonder of it overpowered them. At last, he said whimsically, So we've fallen upon heaven, dearest, in an ABC shop. She answered in a voice that held tears and laughter. But terrestrial heavens are short-lived. The little lady started up with an exclamation. I'd no idea how late it was. I must go at once. I'll see you home. No, no, no. He was forced to yield to her insistence and merely accompanied her as far as the tube station. Goodbye, dearest. She clung to his hand with an intensity that he remembered afterwards. Only goodbye till tomorrow, he answered cheerfully. 10 o'clock as usual, and we'll tell each other our names and our histories, and be frightfully practical and prosaic. Goodbye to heaven, though, she whispered. It will be with us always, sweetheart. She smiled back at him, but with that same sad appeal that disquieted him and which he could not fathom. Then the relentless lift dragged her down out of sight. He was strangely disturbed by those last words of hers, but he put them resolutely out of his mind and substituted radiant anticipations of tomorrow in their stead. At 10 o'clock, he was there, in the accustomed place. For the first time, he noticed how malevolently the other idols looked down upon him. It almost seemed as if they were possessed of some secret evil knowledge affecting him, over which they were gloating. He was uneasily aware of their dislike. The little lady was late. Why didn't she come? The atmosphere of this place was getting on his nerves. Never had his own little friend. Their God seemed so hopelessly impotent as today, a helpless lump of stone, hugging his own despair. His cogitations were interrupted by a small, sharp-faced boy who had stepped up to him and was earnestly scrutinizing him from head to foot, apparently satisfied with the result of his observations. He held out a letter, for me. It had no superscription. He took it, and the sharp boy decamped with extraordinary rapidity. Frank Oliver read the letter slowly and unbelievingly. It was quite short. Dearest, I can never marry you. Please forget that I ever came into your life at all, and try to forgive me if I have hurt you. Don't try to find me, because it will be no good. It is really goodbye. The lonely lady. There was a postscript which had evidently been scribbled at the last moment. I do love you. I do indeed. And that little impulsive postscript was all the comfort he had in the weeks that followed. Needless to say, he disobeyed her injunction not to try to find her, but all in vain. She had vanished completely, and he had no clue to trace her by. He advertised despairingly, imploring her in veiled terms, at least to explain the mystery, but blank silence rewarded his efforts. She was gone, never to return. And then it was that for the first time in his life, he really began to paint. His technique had always been good. Now, craftsmanship, and inspiration went hand in hand. The picture that made his name and brought him renown was accepted and hung in the Academy, and was accounted to be the picture of the year, no less for the exquisite treatment of the subject than for the masterly workmanship and technique. A certain amount of mystery, too, rendered it more interesting to the general outside public. His inspiration had come quite by chance. A fairy story in a magazine had taken a hold on his imagination. It was the story of a fortunate princess who had always had everything she wanted. Did she express a wish? It was instantly gratified. A desire, it was granted. She had a devoted father and mother, great riches, beautiful clothes and jewels, slaves to wait upon her and fulfill her lightest whim, laughing maidens to bear her company, all that the heart of a princess could desire. The handsomest and richest princes paid her court and sued in vain for her hand, and were willing to kill any number of dragons to prove their devotion. And yet, the loneliness of the princess was greater than that of the poorest beggar in the land. He read no more. The ultimate fate of the princess interested him not at all. A picture had risen up before him of the pleasure-laden princess with the sad, solitary soul, surfeited with happiness, suffocated with luxury, starving in the palace of plenty. He began painting with furious energy. The fierce joy of creation possessed him. He represented the princess surrounded by her court, reclining on a divan. A riot of Eastern color pervaded the picture. The princess wore a marvelous gown of strange colored embroideries. Her golden hair fell round her, and on her head was a heavy jeweled circlet. Her maidens surrounded her, and princes knelt at her feet bearing rich gifts. The whole scene was one of luxury and richness. But the face of the princess was turned away. She was oblivious of the laughter and mirth around her. Her gaze was fixed on a dark and shadowy corner, where stood a seemingly incongruous object, a little gray stone idol with its head buried in its hand in a quaint abandonment of despair. Was it so incongruous? The eyes of the young princess rested on it with a strange sympathy, as though a dawning sense of her own isolation drew her glance irresistibly. They were akin, these two. The world was at her feet, yet she was alone, a lonely princess looking at a lonely little god. All London talked of this picture, and Greta wrote a few hurried words of congratulation from Yorkshire. And Tom Hurley's wife besought Frank Oliver to come for a weekend and meet a really delightful girl, a great admirer of your work. Frank Oliver laughed once sardonically and threw the letter into the fire. Success had come, but what was the use of it? He only wanted one thing, that little lonely lady who had gone out of his life forever. It was Ascot Cup Day, and the policeman on duty in a certain section of the British Museum rubbed his eyes and wondered if he were dreaming. For one does not expect to see there an Ascot vision, in a lace frock and a marvelous hat, a veritable nymph as imagined by a Parisian genius. The policeman stared in rapturous admiration. The lonely god was not perhaps so surprised. He may have been in his way a powerful little god. At any rate, here was one worshipper brought back to the fold. The little lonely lady was staring up at him, and her lips moved in a rapid whisper. "Dear little god, Oh, dear little God, please help me. Oh, please do help me. Perhaps the little God was flattered. Perhaps, if he was indeed the ferocious, unappeasable deity Frank Oliver had imagined him, the long, weary years and the march of civilization had softened his cold, stone heart. Perhaps the lonely lady had been right all along, and he was really a kind little God. Perhaps it was merely a coincidence. However that may be, it was at that very moment that Frank Oliver walked slowly and sadly through the door of the Assyrian room. He raised his head and saw the Parisian nymph. In another moment, his arm was round her, and she was stammering out rapid, broken words. I was so lonely, you know. You must have read that story I wrote. You couldn't have painted that picture unless you had, and unless you had understood. The princess was I. I had everything. And yet, I was lonely beyond words. One day, I was going to a fortune teller's, and I borrowed my maid's clothes. I came in here on the way and saw you looking at the little god. That's how it all began. I pretended, oh, it was hateful of me. And I went on pretending. And afterwards, I didn't dare confess that I had told you such dreadful lies. I thought you would be disgusted at the way I had deceived you. I couldn't bear you to find out, so I went away. Then I wrote that story. And yesterday, I saw your picture. It was your picture, wasn't it? Only the gods really know the word ingratitude. It is to be presumed that the lonely little god knew the black ingratitude of human nature. As a divinity, he had unique opportunities of observing it. Yet, in the hour of trial, he, who had had sacrifices innumerable offered to him, made sacrifice in his turn. He sacrificed his only two worshippers in a strange land, and it showed him to be a great little god in his way, since he sacrificed all that he had. Through the chinks in his fingers, he watched them go, hand in hand, without a backward glance. Two happy people who had found heaven and had no need of him any longer. What was he, after all? But a very lonely little god in a strange land. The Lonely God was first published in the Royal Magazine in July 1926. It is one of Christie's few purely romantic stories, and she herself considered it to be regrettably sentimental. Nevertheless, the story is interesting, for it foreshadows Christie's lifelong interest in archaeology, which she identified as being her favorite study in her contribution to Michael Parkinson's Confessions album 1973, a book published for charity. It was a common interest in archaeology that led to her meeting the man who became her second husband, the celebrated archaeologist Max Mallowan. For many years after the Second World War, she and Mallowan spent each spring at Nimrud in Assyria, and Christie's own account of excavations at Tel Brak in Syria in 1937 and 1938. Come, tell me how you live. 1946 is an entertaining and informative guide to the sights and this important other side of her character. While she never, apparently, wrote while on expedition, her experiences did provide material for several novels, including The Poirot Mysteries, Murder in Mesopotamia, 1936, Death on the Nile, 1937, An Appointment with Death, 1938, as well as The Extraordinary Death Comes as the End, 1944, which is set in ancient Egypt over 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. Chapter 6, Sounds in the Night. The desert sand was still hot under his boots when Garston returned to the small barracks. The dim light from the command building, the place where Mary had entered that afternoon, was over. It seemed like it was over a reunion, a parting, and old scars rubbed with salt once more. But something was wrong. He did not leave. He returned. Half an hour later, under a quiet night sky, with only the wind whistling through the rotten wooden posts and the rattle of the water tank rope. In his coat pocket, his hand clutched a small object, an old silver pen, Mary's. She had dropped it in her haste, but it was more than the pen that brought him back. But that last look, the look was not of someone accepting fate, but of someone pleading for help. Garston walked silently toward the barracks where the native soldiers had set up camp. The air was deathly still, as if the desert were holding its breath. Then a noise, not loud, just like the sound of shattering ceramic or metal hitting stone. Garston stopped, sliding closer to the cracked earthen wall. On the other side, a figure passed through the small window. Mary. She was not wearing the white dress from the afternoon, but an old soldier's uniform, her hair loose, and she was holding a wooden box. She looked around, as if she was hiding from someone. When she turned back, he caught a glimpse of panic on her face. Then a man appeared behind her, her husband. No words, no noise, just the man's hand on her shoulder with a force that made her stop. They stood still for a few seconds. Then together, they turned back inside. Garston stepped back. His heart pounded, not with jealousy, but with instinctive warning. There was something behind the silence. Mary was not a woman who was afraid, but that face, that look, could not be faked. He went back to the jeep and opened the glove compartment. There was still the army pistol and the small flashlight. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from something deep inside him, the instinct to seek the truth, the thing that had made him unable to love anyone else after Mary. Tonight, I will not leave. Tonight, the light will finally reveal the true darkness. Chapter 7. Breath of the Desert. Sand crunched under his slow steps. Garston followed the laterite wall that led to the restricted area where the local commandant, Mary's husband, was stationed. The main gate was closed, but he had no intention of entering through the front. Since the war, he had learned to approach his targets in a circular way, silently, without leaving a trace. He stopped at a low corner where the air vents were cut into the stone. From there, he could see a yellow light coming from a small window at the back of the house. There was a faint sound, someone moving, then a voice, low and dry, probably a man's. You thought it wouldn't come. You thought I didn't know everything. Mary's voice rang out, small and trembling. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just talking to him. Were you following me? There was an eerie silence. You think I'd let that happen again? After all I've done for you. Garston clenched his fists. Those were not the words of a husband. They were the words of a controller, a threat. He moved closer, keeping to the shadows. The back window was open just enough for him to see Mary crouched by the table, and the man tall, with silver-flecked hair, standing in front of the door like a wall. On the table was a stack of documents, and what made Garston pause, a topographical map of the desert, marked in red. The inked line led to the southern border, a forbidden area where no military presence was allowed. Garston understood. This was more than just a love affair. Mary was caught between a military conspiracy and a powerful man willing to sacrifice everything to keep it hidden. She didn't just need saving, she needed freeing. Mary's voice rang out, sharper. You can threaten me, but you can't hide it forever. Garston knows. A sharp slap. Garston sprang from his hiding place. The back door was locked. He backed away, calculating, then kicked the hinges. The wood splintered. The man turned, gun drawn. Mary fell to the side. But Garston pointed his military pistol at the man. He said coldly, "Put down the gun. Now." The three of them stood there, not moving, only breathing, rapid, smelling of dust and blood. Then the man laughed. "You think a gun is enough to save her from me? You're in this together now, Garston." Garston did not take his eyes off him. "Then let's start with me." Chapter 8. The Truth in the Dark. The man lowered his gun, but the smile remained on his lips, the smile of someone who knew that force was not the only power he held. Mary stepped back, clutching her cheek, eyes wide. Garston stood between her and her husband, his arms iron, his gun pointed. But he knew that in a place like this, the weapon was not just in the barrel. It was in the head, in the files, in the secrets guarded by rank. "I saw the map," Garston said. "You are planning to move goods across the border without any military orders." The man glanced at the documents. "You don't understand. It's a security issue. High level. None of your business." "What does Mary have to do with that high level?" Garston asked. "Kan si sama sai ta hayan." A flicker of hesitation in his eyes, then a dry laugh. "She knows too much, but she loves you. It's her fault." "Now you're both stuck." Mary stepped forward, her voice cold as fog. "I will. If you do nothing." "Garston, I know he is using the military name to smuggle supplies and weapons to a rebel faction in the South. I have typed the documents. I have listened to the phone calls. He calls it stabilizing the border. But you know the truth. It is treason." Garston looked at Mary for the first time, seeing her not as the bewildered shadow of a woman trapped in the past, but as a witness, a warrior. "Do you have proof?" he asked. She nodded, slowly, as each memory came back to her each night, each report, each code. She pulled open a desk drawer and took out a roll of microfilm, small, black, almost invisible. The man lunged, but this time Mary didn't back away. She slammed the film roll on the floor and stomped on it. "I have a copy," she said, her eyes unblinking. Silence stretched across the hot, stuffy room. Then Garston spoke. "We need to get out of here. Tonight." The husband stepped back, breathing heavily, but he did not protest. He knew. Time was no longer his. Outside, the desert was still. But in that darkness, something had shifted. The air smelled different, of change, of punishment, of beginnings. Chapter 9. The Way Out in the Dark. The desert night was not only cold, it was a trap. No light, no people, just sand, wind, and howling silence. Garston drove the old Jeep close to the edge of the palm grove. Mary sat beside him, clutching the canvas bag containing the microfilm roll. "Are you sure he hasn't called anyone to block the road?" Garston asked. "Probably," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice. He didn't expect me to destroy the original. I've outwitted him long enough to know he'll wait for me to back down. But not this time. Garston looked at her for a long moment. There was no longer fear in Mary's eyes, only determination and anger. Part of him admired that. Part of him feared it. The headlights were just two blurry streaks through the dust. They were approaching the checkpoint, a place where Garston had an old acquaintance. Or had been, until everything went black. If things go wrong, he said, run at all costs. Don't look back. No, Mary replied dryly. We're in this together. He said nothing more. The checkpoint loomed like a ghost, a wooden shack, dimly lit. Two tired guards. Garston stopped the car, got out, and tried to keep his voice casual. Hey, hello, he said. It looks as hot as the day I left. One of the soldiers raised his head. His face darkened. Then he nodded slowly. There's only one way out tonight. But someone asked about you this afternoon. Mary stiffened. Geek? Eaton. Who? No name. But he didn't smile, and he left a picture. The soldier pulled it out. It was Garston's, with a red ink mark around his head. The gallows for traitors. The soldier whispered. I am not a traitor, Garston whispered. I expose traitors. The heavy silence spread like smoke. Finally, the soldier shook his head. I owe you. Go. But from now on, you and she have no one to trust. There is no turning back. Garston nodded. There was nothing more to say. He turned back to the car. They crossed the station in silence. The sky was torn by a thin moon. In the distance, a siren wailed from the city, a sign that they had probably been spotted. Next, Mary asked. Without turning her head, Garston stepped on the gas. Find a way to the border. Find someone who can tell you what you know. Before someone silences us, and if not, he looked at her, smiling slightly, a smile only seen in moments of near darkness. At least we weren't silent. Chapter 10. When the light is still on. The border was less than 10 miles away, but Garston knew the real distance was time, space, and time was running out. The jeep rolled into the night like a dying ghost. Mary no longer asked, no longer spoke, just held tightly to the duffel bag, the only thing that could change the world and kill them. Suddenly, the lights behind him flashed 3 armored vehicles. No sirens, no warnings, just speed, and the intent to kill was as clear as the hot sand under the tires. Here they come, Garston said, as calmly as if announcing rain. Mary turned her head, eyes wide. What can we do? Garston did not answer at once. He turned sharply down a narrow path, sand flying up like blood. There's a ravine ahead. If we get there first, maybe, just maybe. Mary understood. No one wins in this game. Only those who survive long enough to send the truth. They came to the ravine, where 2 cliffs stood like the gates of hell. Garston stopped the car, panting. You have a microfilm copy, Mary nodded, pulling out a tube of lipstick. Inside. Just need the right person to open it. He looked at her. Who is that? Emily Ransom, reporter, New York Times. She believes in me. Garston nodded. Good. Go. Climb this way through the palm trees. Keep going straight, and you'll find the trail to the transmitter. Mary stepped back. And you, I will hold them off. She shook her head, tears welling up, but not falling. You're not a hero. I know, but you will live, and the truth will speak. Mary hugged him one last time. Then she turned away, disappearing into the darkness. 10 minutes later, the headlights were shining straight into the cliff. Garston stood there, alone, unarmed, just a tired body, a bloody smile, and a lighter in his hand. The first car stopped. A man got out, tall, steely-eyed, the one who had sold secrets to the enemy. He approached. "Where is she?" he roared. Garstein chuckled hoarsely. She saw the light. You chased shadows. Without waiting for an answer, he lit a match, throwing it into the leaking oil tank behind the Jeep. Fire flared up, like a small sun exploding in the heart of the desert. The next morning, at the Reuters office in Cairo, a photo arrived via code. In the photo is a roll of microfilm, hidden in a lipstick, with the note, "He didn't keep quiet. Don't let me." Mary Hargreaves. Chapter 11. The Sleepless Darkness. New York. 2 weeks later. You arrive late. The cafe door is locked. The neon streetlights reflecting off the glass like dried blood. Emily has left. But the envelope she left behind is still unopened. Taped to the envelope, in the mailbox behind the counter. No one notices you as you tuck it into your jacket pocket. The early winter wind begins to tear the night. In your hotel room, you open the envelope. Inside is a satellite photograph, no label, no time. Just a dead patch of desert with 2 humanoid lights, accompanied by a handwritten note. Garston is not dead. He disappeared to exact his revenge in silence. You know this is more than a political secret. This is a story that, if revealed, no one will survive the end. London, BBC News Office. Emily stared at her computer screen as the email popped up. Garston confirmed, alive, coming back. She swallowed. Not out of fear, but out of understanding the battle wasn't over. It had just begun. Chapter 12. The Man Who Disappeared. Cairo, an old neighborhood. Zamalek. You follow the old map to the apartment without a number. The wooden door has broken hinges and peeling paint. Inside, there is the smell of old gunpowder and burnt plastic. Garston is waiting. His eye sockets are sunken. His right hand is bandaged. No greeting. Just pushes a file toward you. Red label M&H. Contract nightfall. This is why Mary was left behind. This is why I must die. You open the file. Beneath the pages of defense contracts and bank transfers is a snapshot Mary, standing between 2 helicopters. A panicked smile on her face. Someone is pushing her toward a military vehicle. You understand? They don't just cheat each other. They sell each other. Chapter 13. All We Hide. Berlin. A fake charity party. You stand in a large room, surrounded by polite laughter and overpriced champagne. But no one is here for charity. Everyone is here for the new Clean Energy Pact between Europe and an unnamed Middle Eastern country signed by a middleman, the M&H Consortium. Emily walked in. Black dress, face cold as ice. In her eyes was the storm you saw in the desert that year. You know, we never really leave the battlefield. She whispered in your ear, we just change sides. You pull the USB stick from your collar, given to you by Garston, and hand it to her. Inside is everything, the list of people involved, the money laundered through Switzerland, The recording from the conference room where Garston was framed and Mary was sold as a bargaining chip. Emily took it, but didn't leave. "If I publish this," she said, "the whole government falls. But if I keep it, I become part of it." You say nothing, because in that silence, you have chosen sides. Chapter 14. The Last Light. Secret Investigation Department, Geneva. Garston sat across from you, the dim light illuminating his rough, sunburned face. In his hand was a newspaper. The headline in bold, "Emily Harrison, the mysterious disappearance of a war journalist." You asked, "What did you do to her?" Garston didn't answer. He just placed the necklace Mary's on the table, now charred at one corner. "I thought I knew everything," he said. "But there are things more powerful than the truth. It is who lives to tell it." You leave your room. It's snowing outside. The last light of day fades behind the mountaintops. You're not sure if it's the end or just the beginning. Chapter 15. 4 minutes before dawn. A hotel room in Venice. 4:26 a.m. You sit by the open window, your back covered in sweat, while morning mist curls up from the canal below. Emily disappeared 3 days ago. She left Berlin without a trace, only a USB stick that was mailed to an independent newspaper. The next morning, the front page was a series of articles exposing high-level corruption, with the names of politicians, businesses, secret agents. All of them were in it. You don't feel relieved. There was a knock at the door. 3 times. 1, 2, pause, then another. You open the door. "It's Mary. She is still alive. They thought I died in that warehouse," she said. "But Garston, let me go." She sat down, her hands shaking. In her hand was a phone. "There's something you should see. A video, secretly filmed." Garston, sitting across from a fat, bald man, clearly an official. They talk about another campaign. This time, it's not just about energy, but about shaping elections in 3 Eastern European countries. "I'm not sure Emily knows this," Mary whispered. "If she goes too far." You stand up, feeling your heart rate slow down. "She won't survive again." You say, Chapter 16. A call from the unknown. London. A public telephone booth. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. The voice was female, low and urgent. "You are being followed. Stop investigating. Otherwise, her death will no longer be a fiction." You don't ask who it is, because that voice sounds like Emily, but distorted. You know there is only one way to find out the truth. Go back to the beginning, where it all began. Cairo. Chapter 17. Third file, Cairo. The abandoned office of the World Archaeological Organization. You stand in a dusty room, the harsh Middle Eastern sun shining through the cracked wood. An old, slanted desk is covered with yellowed maps of the desert. On the wall is a black and white photograph, Emily standing between 2 men. One is Garston. The other is someone you've never seen before, but the eyes are somehow familiar, as if they've looked at you from behind one-way glass. Mary stood behind you, silent. "I thought she was working for us," she said, pointing at the man in the photo. "But this guy, he's the one who put her in." You look back at the photo. Emily smiles, but there is no joy in her eyes. It's like she knows her future is going to be torn apart by power plays. She didn't betray you. She betrayed the organization. You turn over the file lying on the table. Inside is a scorched fax. The last line is still legible. Said by October 14th. Otherwise, the third profile will be activated. What is the third file, you ask? Mary looked at her friend, her eyes no longer mocking or guarded for the first time. It was the code name for Emily's final plan. She said. She gathered all the evidence and hid it in the one place no one would expect in the Kremlin itself. Chapter 18. Facing the Devil. Moscow. A basement room of the National Defense Archives. You have never felt so cold before. Not because of the climate, but because the air in this room is so stifling that it freezes your very soul. You, Mary, and an ex-spy named Vasiliev stand before an ancient safe. Vasiliev, trembling but precise, types in 3 numbers. Click. Inside was a black folder with the logo scratched off. The first page had a picture of Emily with red text, out of control, process on order 14X. You swallow. Mary turns away. What is order 14X? Vasiliev took a drag on his cigarette, his eyes looking into the distance. Staged suicide. You clutch the file. Emily didn't kill herself. She was pushed into a corner and forced to disappear like a worthless pawn. But now, all the evidence is in your hands, and you will burn all those who played this game with the pieces they thought they lost. Chapter 19. The Last Mask. Berlin. A global security conference. Underneath is a tunnel never recorded on the map. You stand in the shadows. A fake passport in your pocket. A black dossier in your hand that the entire underworld wants to destroy. On stage, the familiar face of John Greer, the U.S. Special Envoy, speaks. He looks serious and dignified, but you know that under his suit is the circular scar Emily left with a cigarette the night she learned she had been betrayed. Mary said through the headset. Greer was the one who ordered 14X. He pulled the strings on both sides, the British and the Russians. Emily found out, and they had to deal with her. You reply with a low hum. Below the stage, you find the entrance to a forbidden tunnel, as per the map in the 3 files. You sneak into it, where dim lighting reveals a small room with recording equipment, an old camera, and a locked metal box. You open it. Inside is a videotape of Emily. If you're watching this, her voice rang out, dry and pained. Then I'm dead, but I made it worth it. She tells of Greer's interrogation, of being chosen as a double agent, of falling in love with her friend, and then learning that he was planted in her life. Your hands shake. It can't be. It's not you. But the second tape starts. So, you are in a Paris cafe, meet Greer, shake hands, take money, and say, I will make her believe. Chapter 20. The remaining one. Temporary base in Warsaw. Early winter morning. You sat on the wooden chair. Emily's video in your jacket pocket. Mary walked in, silently, placing the gun on the table between you. I saw it. You betrayed her. You do not object. Mary sat down, took out a cigarette, but did not light it. Greer's dead. There was an explosion last night. Someone planted a mine, either the Russians or her. You look up. She's dead. Mary shook her head slightly, smiling softly. Are you sure? You open your phone. An anonymous text message has just arrived. I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to move on. Leave the rest to you. You You stand up, leaving the gun behind. You look out the window, where snow is starting to fall lightly. Emily is alive, somewhere, and you are now the last bearer of the truth. Key. A truth the world will never be ready to accept.